Rockaware, since its inception, has been a part of hip-hop culture. It's primarily related to the rise of Jay-Z, who tried to set himself apart from the rest of the pack by dressing very different for his concerts and music videos. In 1995, Jay-Z, Kareem Burke, and their longtime friend and business colleague Dame Dash established Roc-A-Fella Records. Dame suggested that Jay-Z, eventually after years later, launch an urban apparel line, given his expertise in the field. The term urban clothing was unknown to most at the time, and even fewer stores stocked that kind of clothing. So this was innovation from the get-go, although you somewhat had brands like Fubu taking off at the time. And even though Tommy Hilfiger's entry into streetwear was relatively new, Dame and Jay-Z were well versed in the customs of hip-hop culture. Roc-A-Fella Enterprises established its apparel label Rockaware in 1999 with the help of a small group of investors. Dame managed Rockaware's finances as Jay-Z and Kareem Biggs worked on the rap side of things, continuing to drop albums while wearing the brand's clothing. The firm's quick growth is largely attributed to Jay-Z and Dame's ingenious co-branding strategy and their huge network and influence over not only the rap side of the music industry, but the listeners. The initial concept for Dame included the addition of the singer Charlotte Ronson. Ronson always wanted to launch her own clothing line, but she never knew where to begin. She was just 21 years old at the time and partnered with Rockaware to access distribution and money. Since then, she was able to focus more energy on refining her items' designs. Between 2000 and 2003, Rockaware was blowing up in the streets. In 2000, Rockaware released their Afro Thunder line of clothing for the Ready to Rumble video game. Sony's Midway Games subsidiary was called upon to help with this. Towards the end of the year, Macy's introduced a line of clothing inspired by the Rumble video game. As additional Rumble games came out, fans of the series and newcomers alike purchased items from that exclusive clothing line. When Beanie Sigel was cast in the 2002 film State Property, it gave Roc-A-Fella Records another opportunity at stardom. The movie took place in the inner city and had a lot of the elements of hip-hop. It was a joint production between Lionsgate and Roc-A-Fella, and Rockaware's newest collections were shown during the event and the movie. By titling their clothing company State Property, they split the earnings with Beanie Sigel. Sigel, Philadelphia rapper, wore Rockaware throughout both of the films. In the middle of the year, after spending the first half in LA, Dame and the crew traveled to Paris to shoot a commercial for Rockaware's new State Property collection and other items. Models, rappers, and even Victoria Beckham of the girl group The Spice Girls were cast in a commercial for Dame that was shot in and around Paris. He believed that people in Europe would like it. Rockaware also had a shop in the Netherlands capital Amsterdam. Even though Rockaware was now a $120 million business with a strong image as an urban lifestyle brand in the US, Dame was set on growing the brand internationally. A year prior, Rockaware had moved its headquarters from 7th Avenue to a 35,000 square foot showroom in New York City's Garment District, and their slogan was, "It's not where you're from, it's what you rock." Charlotte Ronson's clothing line had a storefront window display at Rockaware the next year. Ronson's DJ brother Mark and twin sister Samantha, who were finishing an album for Roc-A-Fella Records, were featured in the brand's new menswear line at the time. Sales of almost $1 million by C. Ronson had shown that Rockaware was right to support the smaller sub-label. In 2003, Dame was at the top of his game. Roc-A-Fella Entertainment, which included Roc-A-Fella Records and Films, made over $300 million in gross revenue. Roc-A-Fella artists had platinum-selling rap albums. Roc-A-Fella Films had successfully released movies, including State Property 2. And in addition to introducing a new lifestyle magazine to the globe, he established Rock Music, a company focusing on hip-hop, R&B, and pop music. To attract more customers and grow his company, Dame advertised his magazine as part of a multicultural movement. He told Crane's New York Business of his plans to conquer the planet and acquire $1 billion fortune. In 2003, Rockaware inked a deal with London's Selfridges to market their products and hired Victoria Beckham, wife of star soccer player David Beckham, and Naomi Campbell, a top model, to represent the brand. Rocawear hired David Gensler in the middle of the year to head up a new advertising agency called Native DBG. Dash started the agency to empower Rocawear to grow the company's popularity and customer base. In 2004, though, problems began to arise. Dame's legal troubles at the beginning of 2004 were a setback for the Rocawear brand and the meticulously cultivated rock empire. After Jay-Z supposedly resigned from Roc-A-Fella Records, Def Jam Records, which owned 50% of Roc-A-Fella at the time, expressed interest in hiring him. Def Jam had been after Jay-Z, Dame, and Burke for the better part of years to acquire Roc-A-Fella. Roc-A-Fella is now wholly owned by Def Jam, and each partner got $10 million in exchange. During that deal, Dame was also sued by a model who claimed he assaulted her. The problems for the new Rocawear advertising agency began around that time. Dame dissolved the firm and laid off most of the staff after having a conflict with Gensler. Roy Edmondson, previously from Levi Strauss, was hired by Dame to serve as vice president of Rocawear. Edmondson's job as Rocawear's director of marketing and public relations was challenging, with what Dash's legal troubles and the fact that Beanie Siegel, the face of the popular state property clothing line, was going to jail on federal weapons charges. Almost immediately, word spread that Dame and Jay's collaboration with Rocawear had ended. After Jay-Z was made CEO of Def Jam, things quickly deteriorated, although this was Roc-A-Fella Records and not necessarily the clothing brand. Jay-Z was on his own without the co-founders, Dame and Burke, ending up with considerable shares in Def Jam. Dash and Burke were disappointed to learn that Jay-Z had purchased Roc-A-Fella Records. According to rumors, Jay-Z proposed to sell his share of Roc-A-Fella to Dash and Burke for the exclusive rights to his first album on the label, Reasonable Doubt, to make up with them and preserve the peace for their other companies, such as Rocawear. Some speculated that Dame took the job after Burke turned it down. It had been reported that although Burke declined the offer, Dame accepted it. A lot of missing pieces that we may never get the full story. But Dame and Burke were now officially on one side of the supposed split, while Jay-Z was on the other side, the winning side. Despite all the setbacks, though, Rocawear continued to thrive. In 2004, Rocawear started making outerwear in partnership with Brandon Thomas Designs. In addition, the company teamed with Gina Hosiery of New York to develop its first collection of socks, and the business's tire jewelry line, which comprised of watches and other gem-encrusted goods from the brand, was sold by Tiffany & Co. That jewelry, however, costed at least $20,000, making it unattainable for anybody except the high rollers. The Stride-Rite Corporation granted Rocawear a license to produce Pro-Keds, and the company planned to issue a limited edition of the shoes under the state property brand. Rocawear also intended to launch a sportswear line called Team Rock. The New York and Los Angeles Foot Locker stores would be the first to stock it, followed by Macy's. It's puzzling, though, that Rocawear's La Familia ad didn't debut until the middle of that year. Dame's sister, Stacy, also an actress, and his kids and a crew of Roc-A-Fella Records rappers also made appearances. On May 10, 2004, the Daily News Record reported that Dame stated, "Everyone is family under the rock roof. We have a deeper connection than just one of business or friendship. When it comes to art, everyone always cheers each other on."
Hey, Jody. Give me some sugar. It's not a dog. Hey, get off the table! What's wrong with you?
I think you got the message.
There we go.
You're doing great.
How you doing?
Great too.
Ain't nothing bad in here, right?
No, nothing bad in there.
Dame's comments had a major effect on the campaign, but they also made it difficult for him to keep good terms with colleagues. After dismissing Rocawear's internal marketing agency less than a year earlier, he let off 12 people in November, including Edmondson, the company's vice president of marketing. The Daily News reported on November 29, 2004, that working with Dame was tough for several employees because of his supposed impulsive behavior. "Very few people have heard of my company, but I have lofty goals," Dash told the publication.
Not cool.
That's all good.
Very nice meeting you. This is great.
Just don't make me look stupid, all right?
Ryan Kenny was a partner with the company until he left in 2005. More than a year had passed since Rocawear severed ties with the Enyce apparel group before this happened. There had been rumors that Ryan Kenny had disapproved of how Rocawear made their clothes in Malaysia. However, neither Ryan Kenny nor Rocawear commented on that. Rocawear's Pro Keds brand, the joint venture deal with Dame and Patricia Field, had performed well. House of Rocawear, a label inspired by the 70s, included some of those designs. Furthermore, Rocawear did quite well in the United Kingdom as well. But to compete with Diesel and other London designers, the company slimmed down the tops and tightened the bottoms, since the really baggy style didn't have that much of an appeal in these countries. Beanie Sigel made an appearance in State Property 2 in April, not long after the release of his most recent album at the time. But while he was incarcerated, Sigel couldn't promote the film or Rocawear's State Property line of clothing. However, they achieved their goals due to his immense popularity.
You down for that knuckle game, huh?
All day, I do that first. That's first things first. You know what I mean? Watch what you say out your mouth. You know what I mean? Because I might go in it. You know what I mean? Quick.
Yes, sir.
After spending time with Jay-Z and the other Rocawear founders, Dame became disillusioned by around September of 2005. The Rocawear firm, in which he had a sizable stake, was grossing almost $700 million in worldwide sales. His share sales netted him about $30 million. He was handed $22.5 million in cash, in addition to control over State Property and Team Rock. Dame claimed that philosophical disagreements were to blame for the breakup. As reported in their article, he spoke with the Daily News on December 15, 2005. At first, I planned for Rocawear to be monochrome. Jay and the other partners were excited about moving in the opposite direction, but I didn't get it. In response to whether or not he was furious, Dame said, "It was a lovely experience. I could never have predicted that Rocawear would become as popular as it has so rapidly." Dame has said that he was going on to bigger and better ventures, although nothing quite could surpass the success of Rockefeller Records and Rocawear. After Dame left, business at Rocawear continued. The boutique set up shop in a small shop window at New York City's annual 7th on 6th fashion event. In 2006, Rocawear co-founders Jay-Z, Alex Baez, and Norton Share planned to open European stores. In addition to promoting its Rock Box, which was like the iPod, they intended to introduce new lines for women and young adults. Until Jay-Z sold Rocawear to the Iconics brand group in March 2007 for $204 million. Jay-Z continued to oversee product creation, licensing, and marketing. Rocawear introduced its first social networking site in March 2009. There was cultural information, music, threads, and more. Then, 3 years later, he announced a collaboration between Rocawear and Pharrell's Billionaire Boys Club. And it was quite a bit of a comeback briefly for the brand. But the brand was really dying at this point. Anything post-2010 and it was just nostalgia factor. A story in GQ would come out claiming that Rocawear had acquired the rights to produce and market the Billionaire Boys Club. Rocawear was estimated to be valued at maybe a little bit under $500 million in 2012, which was lower than they were grossing years before. Rocawear continued to die, but in 2018, May, a ghost from the past would return. The SEC warned Jay-Z and Iconics in May of 2018 that they may have violated federal securities laws. Jay agreed to testify in court regarding the distribution of his apparel line to verify compliance with security regulations. Jay-Z was summoned by the SEC to answer questions about a $200 million contract he signed with Iconics brand group in 2007. He remained with the company after its sale as CCO. To acquire further brands, Iconics and the celebrity will form a new firm as part of the agreement. The company had been under scrutiny from the SEC over its dealings with the brands it represents, which included Ed Hardy, Echo, and Umbro, for possible violations of securities laws. In light of his commercial links with Iconics, the commission wants Jay-Z to talk about them, the report said. When Jay failed to make his planned appearance, U.S. market officials allegedly turned to a New York court for help. To the SEC, Jay-Z did not attend as required by the subpoenas, and he did not designate any further dates when he would be ready to participate in the probe. He had to appear in court twice, first in November and again in February, when he was forced to get new legal counsel. Some claim that he wasn't there as the main target involved in the investigation. To paraphrase, we know that the SEC has doubts about how Iconics releases its financial information. Jay-Z was completely uninvolved in the report or any other decisions made by the publicly listed company Iconics. The SEC said it issued a compelling order for Jay-Z to provide information about his joint ventures. but the order did not establish that he had violated any security laws. Jay-Z was clashing with Iconics over the Rocawear logo. He had problems with them in the past. They were at odds over using the brand. In 2015, they agreed to submit any future disagreements to confidential arbitration, and due to the dispute, both parties had to pay for the services of 4 arbitrators, these independent third parties who resolve disputes out of court, to reach a resolution. The issue that Jay-Z had was there was a shortage of black arbitrators in the US, and his point was that only 3 of the nearly 200 members of the American Arbitration Association had been publicly identified as being black, which he would find out. And as it stood, one of the 3 arbitrators favored Iconics' side of the argument. According to The Guardian, Jay-Z's lawyers had filed a suit in Manhattan Supreme Court arguing that the lack of racial diversity denies plaintiffs of color a genuine opportunity to have their claims considered by a panel of arbitrators representing their backgrounds and life experiences. According to the petition, both the New York State Constitution and a human rights statute in New York City are being broken due to the absence of a considerable amount of black arbitrators. A member of Jay-Z's team claimed that white arbitrators had an unconscious prejudice towards black defendants. And as for the partnership with Dame, that had been over. In 2019, though, Jay-Z would officially buy back the intellectual property rights for Rocawear for $15 million. He got back one of the things that he had founded, as well as getting back years before the masters to his own recordings. Since then, we haven't seen much being done with Rocawear's brand or intellectual property. The clothing has been dead, like I had mentioned earlier, but Jay-Z definitely has something in store for it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spent this amount of money to buy it. Nike versus Adidas. Legendary rivalry. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Adidas brand reigns supreme in this clash of giants, at least from the perspective of hip-hop. The silent war of brands between Adidas and Nike started nearly 60 years ago. The landscape of the shoe industry has changed so many times during this time, although those two have pretty much usually stayed at the top. During this marathon, both brands had their ebbs and flows, their peaks and their troughs, and even now it's difficult to tell who the clear winner is. Yes, business-wise, Nike is the most well-known sports brand in the world, judging by market share numbers, where Nike has 27.4% compared to Adidas's 15.4%. Nike is also by far the most valuable sportswear firm with a market cap of almost $200 billion, more than double that of Adidas. However, there's still a reason this rivalry is still a thing between us, the consumers, the customers. Some of us simply have a special place in our hearts for Adidas brand's products, but why? You can spot a pair of Nikes basically anywhere. More and more NBA, NFL, and FIFA athletes join the Nike club every year. Classic pairs like Air Jordans and Air Forces coming in and out of fashion consistently. And celebrities love it. There's tons of Nike advertisements everywhere from sports events, celebrity collabs, movies. Sure, Adidas also sponsors athletes, although the disparity in numbers compared to Nike is huge. So how has Adidas gotten the love of the fans all over the world? The answer is a little bit unexpected. I mean, if you like hip-hop, the chances are you have the Adidas brand embedded in your core memories, as Adidas has been an active supporter of rap throughout its history. Even Adidas' latest resurgence is mostly tied to their highly successful collaboration and deal with Ye back in 2015. Yeah, things got progressively weirder with that partnership eventually terminating, and now it caused the brand some unwanted heat on social media, although the streak Adidas was on for those 7 years until the whole Ye pushback was arguably more than worth it for the company. At one point, Yeezys were considered to be the most influential pair of sneakers in the modern history of fashion, and they still are. Turtle Dove Yeezy Boost 350s released in 2015 started the Yeezy craze that generated over $1 billion annually. In West's own words, his company was the second most growing company in history, and at that time made him the single highest paid person in footwear. The Yeezy designs themselves were rather anticlimactic for the mid-2010s, and people's opinions on the lineup were very polarizing, but they seemed like a go-to for most. Some called Boosts ugly, alien-like, and overrated, while others thought of them as something highly fashionable, modern, and fresh, especially as time went on. one thing was apparent. Yeezy's success skyrocketed due to the perfect mixture of hip-hop fans' love for rap music, in particular for Ye's music, the love for Ye's fashion forwardness, and the comfiness and uniqueness of Adidas shoe designs, and some advanced marketing strategies. While things went sideways with the Ye and Adidas collab, the sports brand decided to keep on selling Yeezy designs without Ye's branding, although we haven't seen a release since that announcement. But it's important to note that things weren't always like this between sports clothing brands and rappers. Back in the 80s, Nike's Air Jordans were arguably the hottest thing in the sports shoe industry globally. Nike's brand strategy to target only the highest tier athletes like Michael Jordan paid off, generating a huge wave of brand awareness and profits for the company. Investing in collaborations with athletes was always going to be a safe bet, especially given that Nike had been working with the USA market from day one. They were founded in America. Even now, Nike's strategy is what makes their brand a more successful company compared to others, and getting one of the most recognizable athletes of all time and Michael Jordan on their brand certainly helped them on their rise to dominance. That same year, a young aspiring hip-hop artist named LL Cool J sported a pair of Air Jordan 1s on the back cover of his debut album, Radio, in 1985. Even though one of the hottest new rappers around at the time wore the hottest pair of sneakers, it somehow went silent and failed to make any huge impact on the cultural landscape. Not his music, but the choice of footwear. While LL was a hot prospect back in the 80s, and probably could have sold any product he was given, it was his Def Jam label mates who would go on to kickstart the rap and sneaker world's duo. Established in 1983 by Joseph Run Simmons, Daryl DMC McDaniels, and Jason Jam Master J Mizell, Run DMC were absolutely huge at the time, breaking through barriers and gaining international renown with relative ease. They represented the new music of rap that came from the streets and carried unique urban aesthetics that were deeply rooted in it. Being the first hip-hop group to have a gold record, the first hip-hop group to have their videos played on MTV, the first hip-hop group to appear on American Bandstand and grace the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, and the first hip-hop group to perform at Live Aid and receive a Grammy Award nomination, Run DMC were an incredible investment in the making for basically any brand back then. However, it seemed like it wasn't obvious at the time, as Run DMC were actually the first to make a move in that direction themselves. In Soul Collector issue 21, Run DMC shared their version of the Adidas collab success story. Well, back in '86, we were doing the Raising Hell album, and we rapped about everything. You know what I'm saying? Run DMC, we rapped about everything we would look, touch, eat, sleep, or thought about. The whole Adidas record actually came about. There was a doctor in our neighborhood named Dr. Diaz, and he was like this community activist dude. He even wrote a little pamphlet and he put it around the neighborhood called Felon Shoes, where he was saying that kids and youth in the streets that wore Lee jeans and Kangol hats and gold chains and Pumas and Adidas without shoelaces were the thugs, the drug dealers, and the lowlifes of the community. Being part of the US urban community back in the 80s, Run DMC had their own opinion on this whole situation and decided to take matters into their own hands to push to the wider audience. So we said, let's do a record about our sneakers. Let's talk about the sneakers that we wear on our feet, but let's put a positive spin on it to throw it in the face of this Dr. Diaz who's trying to judge the youth just by appearances. Like, you can't judge a book by its cover. We're young. We're educated. A lot of us go to school. A lot of us have jobs. Basically, the group wanted to fight against a harmful stereotype in a very poetic and straight-to-the-face kind of way. They wanted to show that people from where they came from can be successful no matter what their upbringing was like or what they were wearing. Even more than that, they could conquer the world and make it dance to their music while singing their lyrics. A lot of us, even though we look like our peers in the neighborhood, but you can't judge everybody by that. So we wrote the record Adidas, and we just wanted to say because we had a chance to create hip-hop and travel around the world and do good things with hip-hop. That's why we said, my Adidas walked through concert doors, roamed all over Coliseum floors, stepped on stage at Live Aid. It was meant to be an inspiring track for all people who face judgment and prejudice towards them based on their looks and origins. And there's no need to say that it turned out to be a cultural hit that shaped the entire rap landscape. In short, the first ever rap and sportswear company collab wasn't even technically an endorsement. DMC said, "We actually did the record Adidas because we loved Adidas. Even before we had the record deal, we wore Adidas in the hood. You would save your allowance to get Adidas. You know what I'm saying?" You would just take a job anywhere just to save up enough money to get some fresh new Adidas. So we loved Adidas. After the release of the My Adidas song, Adidas' popularity increased tremendously. And funnily enough, music was so distant from the marketing world, and rap especially, that Adidas couldn't explain the brand awareness boom until one of their employees saw this phenomenon in person. They had a guy in LA named Angelo Anastasio. He was current with the pop and the rock, you know, the club scene and the athletes and the designers and all of that. People were like, you know, Anastasio, have you heard this Run DMC? He was like, huh? What? What the hell is a Run DMC? And rap music? Huh? So they put him up on it. So he went to Adidas and said, you know, listen, I know what's going on. There's this rap group Run DMC that made this. So Adidas assigned him to leave LA, to fly to New York, to go to the show that Run DMC was doing in Madison Square Garden. He came, and he was hanging backstage. But when Run went out there during the show, D, take it off your feet. Hold it up. What's those? Everybody in here, if you got Adidas on, hold them up. So 40,000 people in a sold-out Madison Square Garden held a sneaker up, and Anastasio was like, oh my god, it's true. Anastasio got back on the plane, returned to LA, and reported the craze he saw to the Adidas higher-ups. He explained to his German partners that the reason behind the charts blowing up was an American rap group called Run DMC and a quote-unquote little record they made. The reaction of Adidas higher-ups was brilliant in retrospect. Hold up, Angelo. First of all, what the hell is rap music, and what in the world is a Run DMC? Adidas agreed, and Anastasio returned to the rap group with a deal, or the deal, to be correct. It was the first ever $1 million endorsement deal in the hip-hop industry, and marked a huge milestone for rap in general. And the deal turned out to be a stunning success for the sportswear company. As Anastasio said, I gave them $1 million, but they ended up generating sales of probably more than $100 million over the next 4 years. This level of return on investment is what literally any kind of brand would look for, and in this case, Adidas' vision was rewarded. Adidas began to gain exposure when their superstars appeared in Run DMC and Aerosmith's hit Walk This Way, followed by an appearance on Run DMC's 1986 single My Adidas. Basically, it was the first time for a shoe brand to have its own rap theme song. Given Adidas' brand mentality, Run DMC was the perfect match for them. Young, self-made stars, who were regular street kids, not criminals, not so long ago back in the hood, and rocked Adidas shoes and tracksuits willingly, were a far cry from Nike and the prime athletes who were the face of the company, who often saw it as business-only deals. Run DMC loved the brand. They lived the lifestyle Adidas was promoting, and that's why it looked so natural and led to incredible success. Adidas later honored the group with their own signature superstars, colored red, white, and black, with the Run DMC logo on the back of the shoe. Run DMC turned Adidas' original superstars into something way more than just a pair of classic shoes. A socio-political symbol of resistance and the power of creativity over negativity. The deal legitimized rap in both the public and business eyes, making hip-hop a brand new cultural phenomenon that's still taking over the world.
There shouldn't be no way for me to lose, really.
When I was in 4th grade, I was drawing Jordans when my mama couldn't afford them. I was drawing those Jordans, getting kicked out of class for drawing them. These words are from Kanye when describing when he knew that he wanted to be a fashion designer, no matter how many people told him that he couldn't. Kanye's success is often driven by proving people wrong. When he was a relatively successful producer, he was repeatedly told that he shouldn't try to rap and should stick to his own lane. But he would soon make all of these critics eat their own words with the release of College Dropout in 2004, which is an undisputed hip-hop classic. With this milestone of becoming a famous rapper achieved, he also had further aspirations of becoming a fashion designer. The release of College Dropout showed that there was something different about Ye, both sonically and visually. His unique style of wearing a polo shirt and a Louis Vuitton backpack made him stand out and become a fashion symbol in his own right. In the video for the new workout plan, Kanye wore a polo t-shirt with the mascot bear embroidered on the crest. Given the hype surrounding Ye at that time, he could have easily made a lot of money by mass producing this shirt, but chose not to. When reflecting on this shirt in 2007, Ye told Complex, "There were phases where I could just do the bear on a polo, and it would have made $100 million. but I always say I was a designer before I was a rapper. 2007 was the year when Graduation came out.
Everything we dreamed of, I'm like the fly Malcolm X by any genes necessary.
When Ye had cemented himself as the top of mainstream rap. So he now had enough clout to branch out into fashion. During that year, he co-designed a sneaker for the streetwear company Bathe and Ape, or Bape, which contained the bear mascot on their signature shoe, the Bapesta. But more importantly, he started his own clothing label, Pastel. Pastel was founded around the same time Ye founded his record label Good Music. Both of these ventures had the same ethos. Ye was going to pull from a diverse pool of people that he was a fan of. While Good Music had artists ranging from John Legend to Pusha T, Ye was doing the same with his clothing line. Ye recruited Virgil, Abloh, and Don C, who were budding streetwear designers, but he also enlisted Louis Vuitton's Kim Jones, as well as the Swedish designers Emma Hedlund and Saif Baker. Sunglass designer Daniel Beckerman was in Italy when he received an email from Ye's agency and didn't even know who he was. He had to be told that he's the guy who did the Daft Punk sample song. Beckerman had to borrow money to pay for the flight to meet Ye in New York. For the music video Stronger, Ye also debuted the Venetian blind style shutter shades, something which defined Ye's look for many years. Stronger also contained the lyrics Pastel or My Bape-ish, which was his first public reference to his new label. He wore jackets from Pastel while performing at the American Music Awards and a jacket and sweatshirt on Saturday Night Live. He was basically modeling his own clothing company whenever he could. But on November 10, 2007, something happened that stopped Ye dead in his tracks. His mother, Donda West, passed away suddenly through cosmetic surgery complications. This slowed down his work rate, and Pastel was understandably placed on the back burner. In 2008, Ye released 808s and Heartbreak and was still creating music, but his fashion work took a back seat. By 2009, it was announced that Pastel simply was not happening. Instead of starting his own label, he decided to work with existing brands. On the final track of College Dropout, Last Call,
Good beats for itself. Rockefellers only niggas that help. My money was standing in Sean Park.
Ye nicknamed himself the Louis Vuitton Don. 5 years later, in 2009, he had his own Louis Vuitton sneakers. These were shoes called the Don, Mr. Hudson, and the Jasper, all of which were priced between $800 to $1,200. He also gained invaluable experience by working with Louis Vuitton's Marc Jacobs and Paul Herbert on this project. Later that year, the Air Yeezy 1 would hit the stores. These shoes sold out almost instantly, despite the fact that they cost $215 over 13 years ago. In a strange twist of fate, the kid whose mother couldn't afford to buy Air Jordans had his own shoes sponsored by Nike. It was the first ever Yeezy sneaker, and it was the first time Nike had sponsored a non-athlete. The same year that clothing labels couldn't get enough of Ye, his name would become Toxic. In September 2009, Ye famously interrupted Taylor Swift while accepting his award at the MTV VMAs.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
With everyone, including Barack Obama, slating him for his behavior. Lady Gaga had canceled their tour together afterward, and Ye basically needed to lay low and, as difficult as this may have been for Ye, avoid any further controversy. Ye accepted that he was not taken seriously as a fashion designer, and instead of leveraging his celebrity status to design clothes, he decided to start from the very bottom. 2 days before the VMAs, Ye was at Madison Square Garden performing Run This Town alongside Jay-Z and Rihanna. But now, he was living the life of an intern, where people needed Ye to do some photocopying for them and make some coffee. Ye's first internship was for Gap, where he took things incredibly serious. Gap creative director Patrick Robinson said, "He works all the time, and one Friday night recently he stayed until 12 a.m. A person working there at the time also told US Weekly, he's learning the fashion business from the inside and trying to do it quietly. It was the first time the words Kanye and quietly were in the same sentence. Then he moved to Japan and then to Rome. It was in Rome that he interned at Fendi, and he was paid $500 a month. Joining Ye in this internship program was Virgil Abloh. Although Pastel had not worked out as they had liked, Virgil and Kanye would regularly attend Paris fashion shows together. This was also the same internship that Ye claims to have pitched them leather jogging pants, but was turned down despite this becoming a trend soon afterward. In 2010, Ye came out with My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and it's not an understatement to say that this album saved his career and perception. 808s and Heartbreak was an incredibly divisive album, but this album brought back the fans of his earlier work. At the same time, it also had the same level of experimental ambitions that excited fans of 808s as well. In September 2010, Ye worked alongside the fashion designer Philip Lim to shoot the music video for Runaway and its accompanying short film. With Ye slowly rebuilding his image, he could now take what he learned from these internships In 2011, Ye was fully redeemed after releasing the album Watch the Throne alongside Jay-Z. The flagship single from that album was Niggas in Paris, and hinted at what was yet to come. Ye had been spending a lot of time in Paris, the fashion capital of the world, and for the first time, he was going to hit Paris Fashion Week. Ye's self-funded Fashion Week debuted to fashion critics across the world. Some people loved the fact that Ye was drawing so much attention to the event, but others thought that he should stick to his own lane in the music industry. Women's Wear Daily, which is often considered the Bible of fashion, said that Ye's debut at Fashion Week was neither triumph nor train wreck, and it had the earnest veneer of a beginner, which was sort of endearing. Other reviewers were not so kind. Lisa Armstrong from the Daily Telegraph wrote, Kanye West's fashion debut was like being subjected to an hour-long MRI scan, but not as much fun. It was the equivalent of Karl Lagerfeld launching a hip-hop career, i.e. absurd. And once again, Kanye was being told to stay in his own lane. It was the sort of criticism that motivated him to pursue it even more. As well as criticism from the fashion press, things were not going too well with Nike either. The Nike Air Yeezy 2 was released in 2012, and despite the shoe doing well, Ye was frustrated over financial issues. Essentially, Ye was not getting any royalties off these shoes. For every Air Jordan that was sold, 5% of the profit was going straight to Michael Jordan's pockets. Ye was getting no such deal and reportedly got a flat fee of $4 million a year. Despite the tension in the air, another Yeezy sneaker was set to hit the shelves in 2013 known as the Air Yeezy 2 Red Octobers. But 2013 was also the year when Ye released Yeezus, with many songs on the album referencing his frustration of not being taken seriously in the fashion industry. To promote this album, Ye spoke to Zane Lowe for BBC Radio, where Ye publicly aired his grievances with Nike. While Ye's ramblings during this interview were largely dismissed as eccentric or funny, these were some interesting revelations about the fashion industry that, if true, don't paint the industry in a great light. Ye told Zayn that Black Skinhead and I Am a God were written off the backdrop of being rejected by a famous designer. Ye told Zayn, I Am a God and Black Skinhead were made after Hedy Slimane didn't let me into his first Saint Laurent show. He wanted me to go, but he just told me I couldn't go to any other shows other than that. And I was like, wait a second. You're not telling no editor they can't go to any of your shows. I'm not your boy. In another interview with Hot 97, Ye said that he had asked Nike when Air Yeezy 2 Red Octobers were set to release, and they replied, we don't know. He felt like they were marginalizing him and keeping him at an arm's length. But if Nike were not happy with Ye and would not give him royalties for shoes he helped design, someone else would. As the old saying goes, my enemy's enemy is my friend. So Nike's rival, Adidas, decided to poach Ye, giving him the royalties he wanted and making their own Yeezys in the process. In February of 2014, Nike decided to release the elusive Air Yeezy 2 Red October shoes anyway. It was the last product that Ye and Nike would work on together. In July of that year, it was clear that Ye was still frustrated. At the London Wireless Festival, he went on a long rant on the fashion industry and didn't hold back. He claimed that he was being discriminated against in two ways. Firstly, he was seen as just a celebrity, but a more serious accusation was that he was treated differently because he was black. Ye said, "'Cause you know damn well there aren't no black guys or celebrities making no Louis Vuitton nothing." Then, Ye gives another example to illustrate that it's not just his experience. Another person who's black and also a celebrity is Pharrell Williams. Ye said, "They let Pharrell make those glasses, and we like them, right? They let me make those shoes, and we like them, right?" And they say, no, not no more. That's too much. Stay in your place, sit in the front row of that show, and wear this jacket I made you. Stay in your place. The argument that the fashion industry is racist was quite a big statement to make. Defenders of the industry would have pointed to the fact that neither Ye nor Pharrell had any formal training. The fashion industry typically employs designers with a degree or formal education in fashion, which is a barrier for many people, which may be the reason behind Ye's comments about the lack of black people in the industry. That being said though, during this time, Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen were being praised for their fashion lines. The Row and Elizabeth and James, and both of them had no formal training or education either. In 2015, Ye was back being interviewed with Zane Lowe and talked about his Adidas deal and meeting with Adidas CMO Herman Deininger. Ye told Zane, he believed that maybe I had something more than how big my rap record was in me. He could tell, he knew. He's like, this guy has something to say and to give that's past the current box that he's put in. That same year, Ye launched Yeezy Season, which would become one of many of Ye's fashion shows under this name. The first few years of Ye working with Adidas and launching Yeezy under this line were an example of him finally breaking into the fashion industry. It was over 10 years since the launch of College Dropout, but he finally had people eating their own words once again. In the mid-90s, executives from the clothing label Fila flew from Italy to New York to meet with a new designer. When they arrived, sitting in the boardroom was a black man wearing cargo shorts and a t-shirt. They told him to wait outside because they had scheduled a meeting with their new partner. The man waited outside and once the room was full, introduced himself. He was their new partner. This awkward situation happened to Tony Shellman, co-founder of the fashion label Enyce, or NYC, some people call it. The brand became the clothing of choice for Jay-Z, Eminem, and Busta Rhymes, but for whatever reason, it just fizzled out. The story of Enyce begins with the friendship of Tony Shellman and Lando Felix, who both came from Madrona in Seattle. They were both into fashion and, like many people, worked in fashion outlets for discounts. Lando said, "Tony made me work at Zebra. Then, what I thought was a cool way to get discounts slowly started becoming my career." Even while working at a clothing store together, it was clear that these guys were set for business. Because of the lack of sales the store did on Sundays, Tony and Lando came up with Movie Matinee Sunday. In an interview with the New York Times, Tony said, "For $5, kids would get into the store and get a 5% discount on clothes. We showed hip movies like Purple Rain. We went from doing $1,600 on Sunday to doing 10 grand. When their boss found out about this, they thought they were going to be fired. Instead, they got promoted to a much bigger store in Seattle." Tony moved to New York to study at Parsons School of Design, and Lando followed the exact same path a year later. After graduating, they both got jobs at a major clothing brand named International News, but Tony at this time was merely folding clothes and wanted to become a sales assistant. Tony's boss, Evan Davis, told Tony to go to the Bronx and see if he could get any orders. Davis was hoping to teach Tony a lesson about just how difficult selling was, but realized Tony came back with two $20,000 orders for clothes. In 1994, Tony decided to start his own clothing company, with Lando and Evan agreeing to pursue this with him. Shellman was experienced at marketing, Felix was good at production, and Davis concentrated on the finances. The company was known as Mecca, and International News financed the project. This streetwear label was an instant success, and they sold $20 million worth of clothing in 3 seasons. According to Felix, Mecca started with a revelation. Kids were getting their looks from different stores: shoes from Foot Locker, baggy jeans at Nordstrom, funky tops from some streetwear boutique. We knew we could do an integrated line and make it logo driven with a sporty flair. The only issue was what was coming from higher up. According to Tony, we did it for 2 years, but then International News wanted to put the name Mecca on anything: socks, jewelry, cologne. That's not what we wanted, so we sold Mecca to them. They soon started the confusingly titled Enyce. It's meant to be a phonetic spelling of NYC, but with a Latin twist. Felix said it's kind of like having a secret because no one ever really says it right. Because of the success with Mecca, many other clothing companies wanted to work with them and finance Enyce. And this is where he had an incredibly memorable meeting where executives from Fila told him to wait outside. Speaking about this moment in the New York Times, he said, "They all felt terrible and apologized, but it just spoke to my philosophy to be yourself, wear your own suit." The label did not have any endorsements or sponsorships from celebrities and aimed to grow organically. But in November 1998, they got as big a brand endorsement as they could get. Jay-Z was photographed outside the Lanesborough Hotel in London by Derek Santini wearing an Enyce fleece while touring his Volume 2 Hard Knock Life album. Jay would become their competitor next year when he started Rocawear. In February of 1999, Tony appeared on the cover of The Source magazine alongside other designers such as Willie Escobar Martinez of Esco, Ralph Reynolds of RP55, Carl Kanye, Maurice Malone. This was The Source's impression of who were the top streetwear clothing designers, and this magazine at the time was an incredibly powerful voice in hip-hop circles. By 2000, the clothing label had now branded into women's wear, and that year they received a slightly bigger endorsement than Jay-Z. Eminem wore Enyce at the 2000 Grammy Awards, which helped expand their streetwear from urban areas and out more towards the suburb and general America. Adam Zuckerman, who's VP of sales at Enyce, said, "Not only was the urban inner city kid buying it, but also the suburban kid wanted to be a part of it." In 2003, the label was incorporated by Liz Claiborne for $114 million. It was a solid investment for them as it was making $95 million annually. The label was also comfortable competing with Jay-Z's Rocawear and Diddy's Sean John, despite the fact that they did not have a major hip-hop artist officially promoting their brand. The deal with Liz Claiborne strategically allowed them to branch out with their women's wear. At the time, it was now 70% menswear but only 30% women's wear. So working with a women's wear brand would help bridge that gap. Evan Davis also admitted that although the Fila deal was successful, it did come with some issues. Speaking after the sale, he said, "Finances were a problem with Fila, but Liz Claiborne is willing to make the investment so we can grow properly. They support us and help us when we need it. We want to surround the brand with items to work closely with the clothes. I do not want to overshadow the apparel, which is why we are in this business to begin with." In the mid-2000s, hip-hop was now mainstream. Jay-Z, Eminem, and 50 Cent were just as big as any other artist in pop and rock music, and streetwear was also outshining other clothing types too. In 2004, Russell Simmons sold his streetwear line Fat Farm for $140 million and told the New York Times, "I was in a Macy's in San Francisco the other day, and there was Fat and Sean John and Echo and Rocawear and Enyce and Shady. Then in the corner I saw Calvin and Polo. I didn't see Tommy anymore." All those brands have gone ice cold. But soon after the Liz Claiborne deal, the founders of Enyce decided to leave the company. Tony, Lando, and Evan left to start up Parrish, a new urban label that also incorporated elements of California surfwear. In an interview with the New York Post, Tony said, "We tell our designers to go have some fun. When designers get caught up in whether a product will sell, you lose a lot of creativity." The Post then speculated that this quote may have been an indirect reference to why they left after Liz Claiborne took over, and there were stormy waters ahead for Enyce. In 2008, a global financial crisis hit, and almost every major company was affected in some way or another. For Liz Claiborne, they needed to strip down their operations in order to weather out the storm. So that year, Enyce was acquired by Diddy and seemed like a perfect fit. Diddy was a big name in fashion and hip-hop, and his expertise could give the label a much-needed boost. Liz Claiborne bought the label for $114 million in 2003, and 5 years later, they sold it for around $20 million. Talk about a fire sale. Explaining the incredibly low price, William McComb from Liz Claiborne said, "The unsettled economic environment and our commitment to properly resource and focus on other brands in our portfolio contributed to that decision." Once the deal was over the line, Diddy released a statement that said, "Enyce has been a very important player in the young men's sportswear arena for over a decade. I'm really excited to bring it into our portfolio of brands that already include Sean John and Zach Posen. I look forward to adding our expertise to an already hot fashion line." He added, "The current economic climate might be challenging, but we believe it's also an opportunity, and we're really excited to add Enyce to our lineup." And this was the key problem. With people losing their jobs or facing financial difficulties, they might hold off on buying new clothes, especially those that aren't the most popular anymore. In the 90s, labels like Enyce were a response to the designer labels ignoring the rise of streetwear, and fashion labels like Enyce, Fubu, Sean John, Fat Farm, Rocawear, and more were helping to fill that gap. By the 2010s, this gap didn't really exist anymore, and brands like Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, and many others had finally embraced streetwear. That being said, by the 2010s, the baggy clothing, streetwear brand it became synonymous with had simply gone out of fashion. In the 2011 song Swagger Like Us, Jay-Z provided his audience with a bit too much information when he rhymed, "I can't wear skinny jeans cause my nods don't fit." In a 2016 Twitter argument with Wiz Khalifa, Ye tweeted, "I made it so we could wear tight jeans." Streetwear growing beyond the streets also had its drawbacks too. In 1999, Tony was asked about the rise of Fubu and said, "Fubu is going to lose its street essence as Little Johnny in suburbia starts picking up its stuff." As these brands grew and grew, there was now a disconnect between itself and their roots, which possibly diluted the value of those brands. But throughout the 2010s, Enyce and other streetwear labels were nowhere near the clothing of choice for the world's biggest rappers. In 2016, Nia Porter wrote about the decline of urban clothing brands in Racked and said, "Somewhere down the line, rappers stopped donning Fubu hats and started looking back to Paris and Milan, to a legacy that was not created with them in mind." The biggest hip-hop stars of the 2010s like Ye, Drake, Travis Scott, Future, etc. were now wearing these brands, or at the very least not promoting them. As a consequence, the millions of fans who wanted to look like their favorite rapper were not pulling Enyce clothing off of the racks anymore. The label's online presence is an Instagram account which has not been active since 2016. A website was up and running, but looks to have been taken down since 2019. Diddy, who never shies away from promoting his businesses online, has never tweeted about Enyce once. Like all good things, Enyce looks to have come to an end, with no future anywhere in sight. In 1992, Damon John and his three friends started to build a brand from the streets of Queens, New York that quickly took over the clothing market in hip-hop, then the US, and established itself eventually as a global brand. For Us By Us, short for Fubu, was a brand that helped hip-hop become a global lifestyle through affordable fashion. Fubu was one of the most rapidly expanding American clothing brands in the 90s, creating everything from baseball caps and sweatshirts to even semi-formal suits. Damon John, who grew up in Queens, New York, created and founded the company with 3 childhood friends, all of whom remain active in the company's management for a very long time. Damon, who was the CEO of Fubu, he entered the industry after getting upset with the menswear industry's lack of street style. His mom taught him to sew when he was just a child. Wool ski caps with fishing line tips were trending in the 90s, and Damon observed them being sold for $20, which he thought was overpriced. He went home and sewed approximately 90 hats. He made $800 in a single day in 1992 by selling handcrafted hats for $10 each on the intersection of Jamaica Avenue. He began selling screen-printed t-shirts after the hats. I went and printed up some shirts when the Rodney King riots were happening in Los Angeles, with lines like, "What happened to poor Rodney King?" Then Mike Tyson got incarcerated, and we did the whole Free Mike Tyson shirts. People purchased the shirts quickly because of the emotional slogan attached to it, and he noticed this trend with his experience. He wanted to create a brand that would make people feel something. To break into the market, he and his friends sold on consignment and at large events around the Northeast. To make ends meet, he held a full-time job at Red Lobster, working on the Fubu business in between shifts. He would later say, "Then all of a sudden there was this amazing music. It's like what we call today a disruptive technology. It came out of the Bronx and it made its way into Queens. It was called hip-hop. This music was today's Twitter. It was a way the kids were communicating about their hopes and their dreams and the plight of the community. And this music not only came with a way to talk, it came with a way to walk and a way to dress, and it was engaging, and I wanted to be a part of it. I started to want to become a part of this culture, and we started wearing these clothes, and we started hearing that these designers didn't want us wearing their stuff. One company called Timberland, they're not owned by the same owners now, but they said we don't sell our boots to drug dealers. I wasn't a drug dealer. I was a hardworking young man who was working at Red Lobster as a waiter. I didn't have enough money to go to college, so I had to get a job as a waiter, and I was upset. Sensing potential in the market, Damon and his mother mortgaged their house for $100,000 to generate some startup capital. In addition to Carlton Brown, he included longtime friends J. Alexander Martin and Keith Perrin into the business. Damon said, "We said we really want to be inclusive and really proud of the people who we're selling these clothes to, so we came up with a name, Fubu, For Us, By Us. It was all about a culture, not about a color." They began sewing the Fubu logo onto hockey jerseys, sweatshirts, and t-shirts. They started designing t-shirts they believed would appeal to young, inner-city, urban consumers like themselves and their friends. First, they put out a couple of ads here and there in publications like Right On Magazine, and the first places where people actually bought Fubu were in Japan and Seattle. Grunge kids from Seattle and teens in Japan who loved hip-hop started buying Fubu clothes. And then they started to place the apparel in various music videos. They took the same 10 shirts and placed them in videos featuring many different artists. For 2 years, we'd take them to an artist and then take them back and put them on other artists and became known as a huge clothing company with 10 shirts. The family home was transformed into a small factory devoted to the production of hats and rugby-style t-shirts. Damon purchased 6 sewing machines and all the materials needed to create the Fubu clothing line, including hiring seamstresses. He rented out the rooms in his home for money and kept the clothing line going. Soon, Damon, who was then also waiting tables at Red Lobster in addition to designing the clothes, had more orders than he could fill, and so he turned his energy full-time into the business. During his downtime, he would visit music video sets and try to get rappers into wearing the clothing. In 1994, Fubu saw the first real expansion. That year, Damon and his partners took their designs to the Men's Apparel Guild in California, an annual retail event held in Las Vegas, and unable to afford a booth at the show, sold their clothes from a hotel room. Within a couple of days, with irrepressible energy and salesmanship, they made Fubu's presence felt. Every accessory and piece of clothing brought to the show had been sold, and they somehow managed to sell $400,000 worth of clothes that didn't even exist yet, which ultimately led to Damon's mother taking out a second mortgage of $100,000 on her home due to Damon being turned down by nearly 30 banks for a business loan. Damon's mother used the last of her money to take out an advertisement in the New York Times that said, $1 million in orders, need financing. Damon said 33 people called, and 30 of them were loan sharks, and one of them ended up being my partners Bruce and Norman Weisfeld. Norman was the president of Samsung's textile division, and Norman said, "You know what? We'll give you a distribution deal." Samsung's textiles offer to distribute Fubu's collection enabled the business to increase both production and the variety of its designs. What had begun with tie top hats and t-shirts now expanded, with Damon and a small team of designers creating jackets, baggy hip-hop style pants, and oversized bubble coats, all of which were emblazoned with Fubu's distinctive logo. After striking the distribution deal with Samsung, the Fubu collection was picked up by the Macy's chain of retail stores, making the label more accessible nationwide. Carlton E. Brown said, "For me, the most memorable moment was setting up our first retail store in Monaco Bay in Jamaica, Queens. Once I saw our goods on a T-rack and saw the people buy what we had created, I knew there was no stopping us." Since the company's inception, Fubu had maintained a close relationship with the hip-hop industry, both in terms of its designs it produced and the advertising that helped distribute it with rappers wearing it. Damon created the slogan "For Us By Us" to show people that he was dedicated to satisfying the fashion needs of young Black American men. Fubu took full advantage of the athletes and rappers and used them in their advertising. Beyonce, Will Smith were among the artists to wear Fubu in music videos. In an interview, co-founder Keith Parent said, "First it started with Brand Nubian in one of their videos. Then Old Dirty Bastard wore it in a Mariah Carey video. Then Busta Rhymes wore it on one of his videos, and LL Cool J decided to wear Fubu on the Hey Lover video with Boyz II Men." Damon told Tim Ferriss in a 2011 interview, "Our product was front and center on the biggest and most influential personalities for our core consumers." This kind of advertising was especially important for Fubu, which didn't have a lot of money to spend on advertising. After Fubu's breakthrough at the Magic Show in Las Vegas, the company soon began working with LL Cool J, who wore some Fubu gear at his concert, and thereafter he became a company spokesperson, giving the small label a high-profile exposure. In 1997, LL Cool J starred in a commercial for Gap in which he wore a Fubu hat and incorporated the phrase "For Us By Us" into his rap lyrics. Damon said, "LL didn't feel good about how Gap approached him. He says 'For Us By Us' on the low in the commercial. They spent $30 million basically airing a Fubu commercial for 5 weeks. The commercial's production team was unaware of the meaning behind LL's Fubu references until the advertisement aired. The subsequent controversy proved to be a big publicity boost for both companies by simultaneously establishing Fubu in the mainstream while giving Gap some street credibility. By 1998, Fubu had peaked with sales of over $350 million. The success of the clothing line during this time can largely be attributed to rappers and R&B singers who wore their clothing in music videos. This was the style to be imitated during the time for young men of all backgrounds in the US and was known in the industry as urban streetwear. According to Lauren Goldstein of Fortune magazine, in 1990 there were fewer than 5 urban booths at the Magic Show. Last August, there were at least 140. The burgeoning interest in urban streetwear not only offered an increase in sales to already established designers, but created an opportunity for small businesses to fill a growing niche market. What fueled and inspired this market was rap music. She went so far as to note that urban wear companies have ridden in on the coattails and jacket backs and baseball caps and shoes of rap musicians. This mix of musical taste and fashion trends made the urban wear market huge. Damon was aware of this convergence and used it to his company's advantage. Fubu's marketing efforts began to focus on broadening the concept of urban, making it more about attitude and style and less about ethnicity and where people were born and grew up. According to Damon at the time, Fubu was a sportswear company. Calling us urban is like saying we come from the street and immediately labels us as something we don't necessarily want to be. The people who buy our clothes know that we're down. They know that we don't just make the clothes, we wear the clothes, and we're a part of the culture. As rap music found a multicultural audience, so did Fubu in the mid-90s. Commenting on the company's successful marketing to America's youth, advertising director of The Source magazine, Peter Ferraro, said, "Fubu is no more hip-hop than the Gap, but by using the language of hip-hop, which is the language of youth in the United States and around the world, they've had success in expanding their brand from the inner city into the suburbs. Hip-hop is the one art form that has cohesion in youth culture. They have understood that hip-hop gets the gear out there on the right kids. From Fubu's inception, competition was fierce, particularly from other new labels. As hip-hop fashion grew in popularity with young men, so did the desire to wear clothes representative of a new urban ethos. Fubu found itself competing with brands such as Fat Farm by Russell Simmons, as well as Wu Wear, started by the Wu-Tang Clan. Given the similar ties to the music industry of Fubu's competitors, it became necessary for Fubu to step up its game. Fubu began growing in popularity with names such as Dr. Dre and a young Ludacris sporting their stuff, but word of mouth was the biggest form of advertising back then, and as more people hit the streets in Fubu, the more the brand grew. Part of Fubu's contract with Samsung required the clothing company to gross at least $5 million in sales within 3 years. They clearly exceeded that figure in less than a year, making it possible for the company to look with confidence at its financial future. Fubu's early success made the company an appealing investment to other names in the industry, and soon Fubu formed licensing contracts that allowed its name to appear on a broad range of women's wear, accessories, and loungewear. Fubu's distribution deal with them gave the company exposure, with Fubu lines being picked up by over 100 Macy's stores and over 300 JCPenney stores across the nation. Even while Fubu went more commercial, independently owned specialty stores continued to carry the label, making Fubu strong in the hip-hop fashion industry as well. In early 1999, Fubu formed a licensing deal with Pietrafesa Corporation, a producer of upscale formal clothes, which allowed Fubu its first experiment with tailored, higher-priced men's suits. In charge of the designing of the line was Pietrafesa, with Fubu heading up the line's sizing and form. The line included both single and double-breasted suits, tuxedos, and a quote-unquote country suit modeled after vintage British designs. Prices for the suits ranged from $395 to $1,500, and they thought that as Fubu's customer base grew older, they would enter the workplace in which formal clothing was required. Fubu's move to corner the tailored clothing market showed they had some marketing sensibility. Just as Fubu looked towards increasing its sales with tailored clothing, they realized that its core line of clothing, bubble jackets, baggy jeans, and oversized t-shirts had become quite popular with women as well. As a result, they developed a line of women's clothing called Fubu Ladies. Also during this time, Fubu's expansion plans resulted in a licensing deal in the winter of '99 with the NBA. Urban wear took many of its style cues from the sports world and basketball, as well as vice versa, with its players in knee-length baggy shorts and loose jerseys, had a particular strong influence over the retail industry. In its deal with the NBA, Fubu created a new line called Fubu NBA, which focused on 40 pieces of sportswear from sweatshirts and pants to jerseys and headgear. Prices were anywhere from $45 to $100, and each item carried both the NBA and Fubu logos. In designing the line, particular attention was given by Fubu to the most popular teams in the NBA, the LA Lakers, the Chicago Bulls, and the New York Knicks, also three demographics that fit within Fubu, urban inner cities. In explaining Fubu's marketing approach with Fubu NBA, the company's vice president, Phil Pabon, said, "Our alliance with the NBA brings a whole legitimacy to our line, not just in numbers and sales, but in that we are a true sportswear collection, whether you want to call us urban, suburban, indifferent. This opens a whole new segment of an existing market." Not only did Fubu partner with hip-hop, pop, and R&B artists, but in 2001, Fubu released a compilation album titled The Good Life, featuring artists like Nate Dogg, LL Cool J, and Keith Murray. The album sold 500,000 units, costing them $5 million to make. But by 2003, Fubu really kind of faded out of the US market, keeping only its footwear division and focusing on building its business in Asia and Europe. According to Complex, Fubu's decline occurred due to its oversaturating the market. As even Damon John has publicly stated, "The biggest mistake we made with the brand was buying more inventory than we needed." This was around 2001. Since then, Fubu has continued to collaborate with various brands, including Pyromoss and Urban Outfitters. They did acquire other clothing brands like Coogee, Drunken Monkey, Heatherette, Kappa USA, and Crown Holder. And while the company didn't completely collapse, there wasn't much talk about bringing the clothing line back into the US. It wasn't until 2009 that Damon announced the brand would make a comeback, and in that same year their worldwide revenues reached $200 million, so a lot of sales were happening outside of the US. In 2010, Fubu relaunched its collection in the US, rebranding itself as FB Legacy. In 2018, Puma began a collaboration with Fubu to create a number of shoes. And in March of 2019, Fubu announced a new partnership with Century 21. The Fubu.com has all new gear that still gives off the 90s hip-hop vibe, but their influence is nowhere near what it was 20 plus years ago, and it's just faded ever since.
Kanye and David Kim's groundbreaking idea was to create affordable fashion that spoke to urban youth. That's how Southpole, which was at one point one of the more popular brands in hip-hop, was born, and oddly enough, at the hand of two Korean-American brothers. It quickly matched up to the level of its renowned competitors and became more of a symbol and representation of young people in inner cities. The Kims got their start in the US when their family immigrated to New York from Incheon near Seoul in 1977. The unconventional transliteration of their surname traces to an earlier family presence in the US. David was the third eldest of the 5 Kim kids. He got a job at a Korean deli when he was 22 years old, but he later left the job and went to work for another Korean immigrant at his wholesale apparel company. In 1981, he took all of his savings of $10,000 and a $5,000 line of credit for merchandising his own brand and opened a retail men's clothing store in Brownsville. Brownsville, Brooklyn at that time was a pretty much entirely black neighborhood. Among them, there were half a dozen other Korean-owned stores on Brownsville's Pitkin Avenue at the time. David describes the situation as, "Sometimes we heard gunshots. If delivery of our products left before dawn, there was a good chance it would disappear." But over time, David became friendly with his neighbors, and sometimes he even gave them clothing or food. David describes it as, "We could not focus on being the outsiders. We had to earn our respect." As the business was looking bright, David hired his younger brother Kenny to assist him. Kenny was a high school student then, and every day after school, Kenny worked as a messenger who carried inventory on the subway from wholesalers in Manhattan to the Brooklyn shop. Later in some interviews, Kenny mentioned that he was paid much less for the work he put in for his brother, saying, "For all my hard work, he paid me $20 a week. But what could I do? He's my older brother, so I had to serve him." Kenny continued working for David through college at the mere salary of $20 a week. But when their Brooklyn landlord upped the rent in 1989, David decided to move his store to Jamaica, Queens, which was another predominantly black area. The shoppers at Queens were into urban clothing fashion. There was a huge demand for baggy jeans, but the Kims couldn't seem to stock them quickly enough. Apparently, other retailers in the area had the same problem. So in 1991, the brothers set up a wholesale business named Wicked Fashions and began sourcing denim from Pakistan specifically to fill this demand. A clothing revolution was brewing in the hip-hop community, and the Kims were in it with all they had. The adjoining Queens neighborhood of St. Albans and Hollis were home to many famous rappers, such as LL Cool J and Run DMC. Then a young waiter named Damon John began sewing hats with the label he created for Fubu. It was in Hollis in 1992 that the brand Fubu exploded and gave rise to one of the early lines of what would become a slew of hip-hop brands. Fubu also had hybrid origins and received backing from Samsung Textiles. Behind the scenes, the Koreans provided the budding Fubu with production and distribution channels. But Black Korean tensions began boiling at the same time with New York and especially Los Angeles when we saw certain riots. But the Kims kept the faith based on the fact that they'll eventually become US citizens. David said, "We just kept our heads down and kept working hard." As demand for oversized sweatshirts and t-shirts grew in the locality, David saw the opportunity to market his label to a broader audience. He named it Southpole. The naming of the brand was an apparent act of Korean patriotism as the first Korean team to reach the South Pole several years earlier. Southpole initially mimicked styles that were seen on the street and sold them for less than the celebrated hip-hop brands. The Kims conducted their own market research in addition to watching what their customers wanted. On one trip to Harlem, Kenny spotted a young black man wearing what appeared to be a down-filled puffy jacket. They took note of the jacket so it could be reproduced with the Southpole label. When the Kims knew that factories in Hong Kong were big at that time, they spread out their photographs and sample clothing purchases, explaining in painstaking detail what they wanted, but logically enough they didn't use manufacturers in Korea, since by that time the rise of labor unions had made it too troublesome and expensive to make clothing there. Kenny had his own ambition to start a mall-based chain of retail stores, selling nothing but hip-hop clothing all along. But he decided to stay loyal to his brother's business and had promised David that he'd stick with Southpole for 5 years, describing it as, People said to me, "Are you crazy? You're already successful." I was a big shot, in charge of designing, manufacturing, and bringing all the products in. I was a vice president, but Southpole was David's dream, not mine. Kanye left for a minimum wage clerk job at a men's clothier in New Jersey Mall, saying, "I had to learn this business from the inside out." After 5 months of ringing up customers and folding sweaters for his brother, Kanye decided to set up a chain of mall-based retail stores focusing on urban street fashion called Against All Odds. He used his savings for rent money. David gave him Southpole merchandise with extended credit lines to support his business. It was 2 months for other buyers and 6 months for Kanye. At that time in 1996, Kanye said, "There were no mall-based hip-hop stores." He set up shop at another New Jersey mall, but at this point, Kanye faced some issues with the local mall. Kanye describes the mall situation as, "The mall was pathetic. I realized pretty quickly that nobody shopped there. You could roll a bowling ball down the walkway, and the chance of hitting somebody was 0. This was my first learning stage." Kanye had to lure shoppers initially. There was some competition because another mall about a mile away routinely drew crowds. But for Kanye, the lease needed to be lowered. So he made up thousands of flyers which had the announcement of 10% off everything in the store. And he left them on car windshields in the other mall's parking lot. Soon, Against All Odds had the foot traffic that Kanye sought. That wasn't all. Kanye had done everything to make his business flourish by cutting his costs in every way possible. He was sleeping at one of his stores. He cut his living expenses to almost 0. He recalled the situation back then, saying, "I had no rent, but my parents were a little worried." For promotional ideas, Kanye brainstormed and observed what others around him were doing. One of his Canadian friends told him that the day after Christmas, which is called Boxing Day, was the biggest shopping day in the malls. Kanye saw a sale opportunity and he grabbed onto it by bribing the mall security guards with dinner on Christmas Eve. He persuaded them not to kick him out that night because he needed the night to set things up. Kanye worked feverishly to rearrange the merchandise in the store, staying up all night and much of Christmas to get the work done, and made big posters that read, "Boxing Day Sale." Kanye said while describing his situation now, "I did get some traffic that day, and a lot of confused people asked about Boxing Day was. Most people wanted to make returns." But the customers kept coming back to his store, partially because Boxing Day isn't really a US holiday. His older brother David also wasn't far away from success. Eno Park was president of the US operations of Samsung's Trill Industries, which was a chemicals and textiles company headquartered in New Jersey, before he joined David as Southpole's development manager. He described his experience as, "David is quiet and shy and is not eloquent, but his way of thinking is extraordinary. He never stops challenging himself. He sets seemingly impossible goals. One of them was to make $1 billion in sales by 2010. It sounds impossible, but I think it's achievable." In 2001, Southpole transitioned from a premium brand to a mid-tier brand and entered JCPenney, and also got picked up by Sears for the first time. Back then, the Southpole brand had pulled at least even with Fubu and sold through Sears, JCPenney, who were America's really big department stores. Southpole was JCPenney's strongest national brand in the young men's category. A chain spokeswoman from Southpole said that, "The popularity of Southpole among teens prompted us to expand the brand to teenage girls and kids." Southpole spent 3% of its revenues on marketing, which is a touch higher than its competitors, although they didn't have a celebrity to show off, which would take paid promotions. David developed a new line called Lot 29. It was developed with Warner Brothers, and the clothes featured embroidered images of cartoon characters such as Tweety Bird. These higher margin items were sold via different distribution channels than the Southpole branded goods. Lot 29's face at the time was Puerto Rican model Jasleen Gonzalez. She described her appearance saying, "Lot 29 approached me after I won America's Next Top Model, and it's been a fantastic experience ever since. They offered me the opportunity to become the new face of Lot 29, and I gladly accepted. I believe that everything that comes my way is a result of divine intervention, and I feel blessed to showcase my skills in their clothes." In 2003, Southpole expanded its reach by signing a distribution license in Japan with Wise Harvest. The following year in 2004, David Kim was recognized as Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year. 2005 was the year when Southpole decided to collaborate with artists for promotional purposes. They enlisted pop star Ciara for their Juniors advertising campaign, further elevating the brand's visibility. As their focus turned towards accessories, Southpole started introducing handbags, footwear, headwear, and cold weather accessories to complement their clothing offerings. Marketing efforts in 2007 led Southpole to sponsor an outfield billboard at Shea Stadium, which was the former home of the New York Mets. It solidified their presence in the sports and entertainment landscape, which was missing up until then. Southpole launched the White Tag brand and the A Prodigy brand in 2008 to help and try to expand their brand portfolio. They secured a license for infant and toddler apparel the same year and tapped into the market for young children's fashion. Unfortunately, after the financial crisis hit in 2008, there were severe challenges for the retail industry. Against all odds, opened stores in California just before the crisis and subsequently filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in January of 2009. However, they emerged from bankruptcy in December of the same year and continued to operate stores along the East Coast. In 2009, Southpole launched the RS by Ryan Sheckler brand, but ultimately shuttered it the following year in 2010. That same year, the WT02 brand, which was introduced, that expanded Southpole's offerings. By 2010, Southpole had become the 5th largest denim brand in the United States, ranking behind Levi's, Wrangler, Lee, and Calvin Klein according to NPD Group figures. In 2011, Southpole launched its Speak Up, Step Up anti-bullying campaign, using its platform to address social issues. Additionally, the brand revamped its website from a business-to-business format to a consumer-oriented branding site, aiming to provide an enhanced experience for customers to directly buy from them. Kanye describes his ideology about urban fashion by saying,
"In our definition, the term urban does not equal hip-hop. Urban is a much larger realm that may encompass hip-hop. It's a widely accepted misconception to correlate urban fashion with hip-hop, but we think otherwise."
Despite being a massively recognized brand, Southpole has been struggling in recent years. In 2019, the company filed for bankruptcy once again and was subsequently acquired by Authentic Brands Group. Since then, Southpole has been working to rebuild its brand and regain footing within the industry, and there are several reasons for Southpole's decline. One reason is that the company's target market has changed severely over the past 2 decades. In the early 2000s, Southpole was popular with young people who were interested in hip-hop culture or grew up with hip-hop culture. However, as that demographic has aged, Southpole has struggled to keep up with their changing tastes and recruiting new people with the new, younger fashion styles. Another reason for Southpole's decline is the company's been slow to adapt to the changing retail landscape. Consumers had been increasingly shopping online, and Southpole wasn't really able to keep up with the shift to e-commerce, and its brick-and-mortar stores have struggled since. But the brand is starting to grow out of the challenges with some new business developments, or they're at least trying to. They launched a new website and have expanded their product line. Southpole has also partnered with several celebrities and influencers in an effort to boost its brand awareness. The company has tried to take some steps in the right direction since then, but it's unlikely that this brand is ever going to grow, and in most of our hearts, it really just holds a sentimental, nostalgic piece of memory.
Kanye West, also known as Ye, is best known for his music, but now he's become just as known for his fashion and design. And in this process of his attraction to fashion and design, he attracted creative people and was an interlink between 2 main people who are now very successful. One has passed away, and that is Virgil Abloh and Don C. But one is spoken about far less than the other. Don C's life story may have some similarities to Virgil's, as they both were from Chicago, along with Ye, worked as streetwear designers, did some collaborations of their own, and remained good friends until the end. And today we'll focus on telling you the story of Just Don's creator, and all of his fashion and design aspirations and those that came to be. Since Don C was a kid, he always loved style. His passion for the rag trade started when he was cutting Bo Jackson Nikes and customizing them using his mother's nail polish. Since that day, adding bold touches to everyday things has become his most distinguishing feature. Also, Don C had his music priorities straight from childhood. "I'm hip-hop. I've been in hip-hop since before it was cool. I remember taking that stance and people from Chicago being like, 'You're a sellout, trying to act like you're from New York. House music was it. You had to choose.'" The door into the entertainment industry for Don C was opened by his close friend, Kanye West, for whom Don C, many years, was a faithful friend and assisted in tour managing, an executive on Kanye West's Good Music record label, and even A&Ring Kanye West Watch the Throne album with Jay-Z. He did a lot of behind-the-scenes work. When I was coming up, people that I looked up to, they used to sun me. They teased me because I was a fan of theirs. That was a culture of rap in the 90s where people thought it was cool to be an asshole. One of the major things I always felt was that if I'm ever given a position of importance, I definitely would never do that. I want people who are a fan of what you do to feel welcomed. I used to meet rappers and they would treat me like I was a goofy because I was a fan of theirs. I was like, dude, what's paying your bills? I didn't understand that, but that's just arrogance. And I'm happy that more positive influences has changed that in culture. Don C has also been mentioned multiple times in many different Ye songs, such as Erase Me with Kid Cudi, Keep My Spirit Alive, I Am a God on Yeezus, and Facts. Around the time when Virgil had just started off as a designer, Don C entered the shop searching for some designers himself, and the store offered him to work with Virgil. Actually, this young man, Virgil, came in here, and he's probably somebody you want to get in touch with. Virgil already knew who Don C was, and that he was a close friend of Ye's, so he created a lot of design ideas in just one day. It was my cousin Manop, music manager John Monopoly, who first met Virgil through Custom Kings, and then Manop introduced me to Virgil. When I first met him, we vibed right away because we could talk about ideas. And at the time, you could only bring people around Ye who he'd vibe with. Don C, Ye, and Virgil became a powerful creative trio and decided to launch RSVP Gallery in Chicago, which their specialty was a boutique that became a wide array of various clothes that were sold in a minimalistic interior, and it was designed by Virgil, the layout. In September of 2009, Sprite Green and Good Music came together and arranged a party at Harris Rooftop Terrace in Millennium Park, celebrating the opening of RSVP Gallery. A lot of famous rappers visited this gallery from time to time, speaking with fans, presenting new mixtapes, EPs, stuff like that, and having events to commemorate themselves. In May of 2011, RSVP was one of the 3 places which received screen-printed silk scarves that were made specifically for Kanye West by famous painter George Condo. A year later, Virgil created Pyrex Vision and launched an exclusive collection in the gallery, which included the famous t-shirt, V, a girl, and a Jersey-esque back panel. At the end of the summer of that same year, Fruition and RSVP Gallery had a very successful collaboration, which included a few shirts and a unique Just Don snapback which represented the UNLV run in Rebels. It was 2011 when Don C launched his streetwear brand, Just Don. Through the years, Don and his brand turned out to be massively successful, although they're not mentioned too much now, but they did have a strong peak. And he's had numerous collaborations with people who he looked up to as a kid, and even some multi-billion-dollar companies. One of the most unique and ambitious opportunities that he probably thought he would never have was with none other than the Jordan brand, as Don C was and still is obsessed with everything that's related to Michael Jordan. All designs that were created by Don C have a strong retro vibe, and he added this quilted shape to the Jordan 2 and in different colors that everybody wanted at the time. And the Jordan 2s weren't a particular silhouette that people that were even into sneakers liked. You had to be a real fan of the 2 specifically to be into it. He somehow made it cool, and many people who bought the shoe didn't even know who he was. Don C created his first baseball caps in 2011 and was working on a model which had brims lined with snakeskin. It was the $150 hat that caught Jay-Z's eye. Don C recalls, "I would come to the studio for making hats and have them with me. Luckily, Jay-Z tells me, 'That's cool, what's that?' And I responded, 'Oh, this Yankees hat that I know you like?' But it was Ye who wore it, and shortly after, he appeared at multiple events wearing this cap on stage. And it was in 2013 when Don C started working with Jordan Brand and started his remodeling of, like we mentioned, the classic Air Jordan 1 and 2 using fancier material and pastel hues. Also, he was working on super limited luxurious sneakers that were very difficult to get your hands on. The first collaboration was at the end of 2014 when Don C was working on the Air Jordan 2 and released a model in the gray colorway with suede elements that were overlaid on leather. At the beginning of 2015, Don C released 3 versions of the original model. The first was called Just Don Blue and was inspired by Chanel's female handbag. Interestingly, Don C made a stance that this model should be produced in Italy as a tribute to its original place of production in the 80s. Just Don, the same placement of suede elements as the gray pair had. The other 2 versions were named Beach, which was released in 2016, and Arctic Orange, which was released in 2017. Arctic Orange was released under the name Family First and was dedicated specifically to women, babies, and children. Don C later on included a male version of the sneakers to complete the family line. All three versions were sold for a retail price of $350 and had Golden Wings keychains and were wrapped in premium sneaker dust bags. In 2018, Don C worked on several projects which included the relaunch of Converse ERX, the shoe which was popular between NBA players in the 80s, and the development of his own Air Jordan sneaker, which was named Legacy 312, or Legacy 312, which was a mix of the Air Jordan 3, the 1, and the 2, all in one sneaker. His remodeling of the vintage top model of the Converse sneakers included details such as the pony-haired upper, some snakeskin panels, cheetah print, and gold chevron branding. Don C even changed the logo from Cons, for Converse, to Dons. I wanted it to be a street basketball shoe, but I wanted to show the beauty that comes from the streets. That's why we played with the jewel tones and stuff like that to represent that this is a shoe that is rooted from the streets, but it has qualities of animals, and it has qualities of precious metals. I think we expounded on it more for the whole ERX collection, where we tapped into the rock bands, and we tapped into having competition, and it's going to be animals versus jewels. To complement this remodeling, Just Don launched a collection of apparel pieces such as graphic t-shirts, basketball shorts, and hoodies. Legacy 312 looked more like Nike cross trainer than a basketball sneaker, but with roots in legendary Air Jordan branding. Don C used the classic combo of colors used for the Jordan sneakers, black, white, and red, and some of the cement. While it looks nothing like a classic model of the Jordan, it did feature a new style that was appreciated by numerous fans of Don C's craftsmanship. It's a Jordan you've never seen before. Sums up the impression pretty well of the Legacy 312. Whether you thought it was hideous, and that's why you had never seen it before, or if you thought it was incredible. 2020 was the year when Just Don had another successful collaboration with Levi's in honor of the NBA's All-Star Weekend. Don C was inspired by the 90s style warm-ups and tracksuits, and this collection displayed a tribute to Chicago, the city's flag's 6-pointed stars alongside red, white, and blue accents. My mood board was the '88 All-Star Game and different Chicago imagery that really represented the city. So that's why I put the 6-pointed star on that, because I felt like that really represented the city. That's the star that's on our flag. The velvet on the side not only represents the color of the velvet, but the pile fabric. It's like a luxurious feel with denim. So it's also that juxtaposition of street and luxe. That's sort of it. It's like street essence. That's my mode. Basketball, luxury, and hood stuff. In 2021, Just Don had another collaboration with All City, which resulted in a lifestyle line that was inspired by his community. The result was a collection of 90s indebted t-shirts, sweatpants, hoodies, and jackets with, of course, the basketball theme and Just Don branding. And it was always more on the luxury end of, quote, sportswear, which is an odd thing and an odd concept. But it was a lot more, I wouldn't say cheaper, but more fair priced, I guess you could call it. Man, All City is just a privilege for me to be able to work with such an amazing, historically cemented partner like Foot Locker. And they gave me the opportunity to be able to deliver Just Don, a brand from my umbrella, in a way that can speak to more people than everything else we do, which is more like collaborations or capsule collections. Even with my main line, I'm not able to penetrate a lot of stores, so I really had to seize this opportunity because it's a dream come true. To be honest, I'm very self-conscious when people from my neighborhood tell me they love the style of my product, but they can't participate. It makes me feel weird, you know? Like, oh man, I do want my people, my cousins, and my family members to be able to participate in what I'm doing. So this feels really good. As recent as March of 2023, Don C joined Mitchell & Ness in the position of its new creative director of premium goods. While being in this position, Don C is meant to continue to influence products such as NBA shorts and headwear. Don is truly an icon and visionary, and after having worked with him for many years, we're ecstatic to have him formally join the Mitchell & Ness family. Fans of the brand can look forward to exciting new products across all leagues that will fuse the brand's heritage with Don C's cutting-edge creative vision. His first project that he worked on was MLB's Cooperstown collection, which launched in April and consisted of premium Just Don shorts that celebrated the Major League Baseball's most recent expansion teams, Colorado Rockies, Florida Marlins, Arizona Diamondbacks, and the Tampa Bay Rays. Working with Mitchell & Ness is a dream come true. I grew up on throwbacks and sportswear, so it's an honor to be able to impact something that affected me so much through my creative journey and love of sports. I'm looking forward to storytelling and creating more timeless products alongside the Mitchell and Ness team. Although it feels like, to most people, the name Just Don or Don C may have peaked with his Jordan collaborations, that's definitely not the case because he's been doing bigger things. It's just more behind the scenes. And you can definitely say that his products or his design touch has reached far more people in the past 5 or 6 years after 2016-17 than it did in the years when he was just doing the Jordan collaborations or the initial Jordan collaboration that got the most success. Kanye West and Virgil Abloh tamed the fashion world and brought it to its knees. But it wasn't always like that, as both fashion gurus started as errand boys at Fendi House after they had already experienced success in a separate industry. So today we look through the thorny path that Ye and Virgil had to walk through to make their fashion dreams come true. Virgil was always passionate about the world of fashion. At 17, my friend Chrissy and I used to be so obsessed with Jordan that we were drawing Nike shoes and sending them to Nike. And Nike would be like, "Oh, we don't accept designs." In fact, while he was studying architecture at the university during his master's, Virgil made lots of shopping trips to New York and started blogging about various brands that produce skate clothing. When I was studying architecture at Illinois Institute of Technology, I had this professor named Thomas Kearns. I remember him telling me, learn these programs and don't use these programs just to make architecture. So that was how I learned 3-dimensional programs and Adobe Suite. And it was during this class that I started making t-shirts instead of just making architecture. As soon as Virgil finished college, his mother taught him all about the basics of clothing design. Having this particular skill set was a push to continue his development in the sphere and create his fashion brand. His t-shirt business was slowly developing with his connections, and Virgil had found out about Kanye West and the place where his merchandise was screen printed. Virgil had an idea to attract the attention of the shop owner, and he decided to do it by creating a collection for good music. The owner of the shop was observing Virgil's work for quite some time, but still, he wasn't sure enough that Ye himself should be made aware of Virgil's work. To make things happen, it took some persuasion from Virgil's side. In a month, Ye hired Virgil to help design his merchandise. Ye was already popular in hip-hop long before he started working with Virgil. In fact, right before their internship started, Ye was on the verge of going on a North American tour with Lady Gaga. Everything was ready for the tour, including stage design, promotional photos, promotional video with the tagline, "What happened to all the rock stars? The fame killed them." But Ye had a very unfortunate moment at the MTV VMAs by interrupting Taylor Swift during her acceptance speech. Well, Lady Gaga canceled the whole tour, so Ye had to start from square one. Right about that time, the fashion house Fendi was in the middle of becoming something entirely new, as Prada and LVMH owned more than half of the company and continued the painfully slow seizure of the rest of the company controlled by Bernard Arnault. CEO of Fendi House at the time was Michael Burke, who had previously worked at both Louis Vuitton and Dior. Only in a 3-year time, Michael Burke acknowledged that Virgil Abloh was a treasure that should be nurtured and admired. But from the very beginning, Ye and Virgil were doing the simplest jobs possible. They were responsible for making Michael Burke his daily coffee. I paid them $500 a month. I was really impressed by the news they brought to the studio. They were disruptive in the best sense of the term. Basically, the coffee-making business was one of 2 tasks that they did quite diligently during their internship at Fendi. And we don't know if this is some sort of hazing, I guess, in that world, or if it was supposed to teach them something, maybe some wax on, wax off. But Ye and Virgil were working regularly 9 to 5, bringing coffee and making photocopies. Every day, going to work, walking to work, getting cappuccinos, we couldn't do anything. We were just happy to have a key card. And sometime, Virgil and Ye had a sit down with Louise Wilson and discussed how to do things in the fashion world the right way. There was a professor by the name of Louise Wilson who was the head of the master's program at Central St. Martin's in London, and she was the teacher for some of the greatest designers of our time. Ye and I sat with her, and we were like, "Hey, we want to learn the right way." And she basically said, "You guys are idiots. You know more than my students. Why on earth would you want to go to fashion school?" But that process was sort of how we ended up interning at Fendi. And when we were there, we did all the meetings. We were off the radar in Rome, getting to work at 9 a.m. on a Monday. We did all the intern work. While still engaged in an internship, Ye and Virgil went on a trip to Japan, where they wanted to learn more about the fashion world. We were doing JPEGs in Japan. We were making Photoshop so much and not making clothes, we started joking about the JPEGs. We couldn't figure out how to actually make the clothes, so we just do it in Photoshop. And Virgil became the fastest Photoshop artist that I've ever met in my life. Around 2012, Ye and Virgil attempted to show their bosses in Fendi the thing that they created: leather jogging pants. The Fendi house wasn't inspired at all and rejected the idea. But just a year later, when their internship came to an end, leather jogging pants came quite a hit. We brought the leather jogging pants 6 years ago to Fendi, and they said no. How many mother effers did you see with leather jogging pants? While still an intern at Fendi, Ye claimed to be involved in designing Giuseppe Zanotti and Balmain sneakers. Ye tweeted, "Snuck to Giuseppe Zanotti factory, still under contract, and learned to design women's shoes for 2 years." The contract Ye was talking about was the footwear deal that he signed with Louis Vuitton, which gave fruit as 3 sneakers that had come out at that time: the Jasper, Mr. Hudson, and the Dawn. When their internship at Fendi was over, Ye hired Virgil to boost his fashion ambitions and create something meaningful in the fashion world. Ye took Virgil and all his team to present the collection of footwear, in which Ye was working with Louis Vuitton in Paris, as well as the DW collection, which was named after his late mother, Donda West, who had passed away in 2007. The collection had an abundance of snakeskin prints, skin-tight leather pants, and fur. While they showed their creations at several shows at Fashion Week in Paris, both Ye and Virgil were showing the streetwear style of their clothes as well. To say the least, the fashion world was not quite ready to be inspired by streetwear. Ye and Virgil were mocked vigorously online, and there were lots of parodies and even a mocking-up episode of South Park. When Ye and I were first going to fashion shows, there was no one outside the shows. Streetwear wasn't on anyone's radar. But the sort of chatter at dinners after shows was like, fashion needs something new. It's stagnant. What's the new thing going to be? In 2012, Donda was born. It was a more than 20-division company that popularized ideas such as products and experiences that people want and can afford, and goals to marry our wants and needs. The company was named after Ye's late mother, and Ye appointed Virgil as creative director. And by doing that, Ye opened a lot of doors for him. Also, Virgil was asked to be an art director for Watch the Throne, the collaborative album by Ye and Jay-Z. It was a very successful endeavor that resulted in Virgil earning a Grammy nomination and opened a lot more doors into the design world. Although Donda really didn't do much for many years. It was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, and not much fruit came out of it for the next couple of years. What happened with Virgil then was a logical continuation that would turn him into a fashion icon. That same year, Virgil started working at Donda, and he created his fashion brand, Pyrex Vision. It was so popular that some New York rappers, A$AP Rocky, for example, were big fans right from the start. Also, this wasn't a big deal. It was screen printing Pyrex, Pyrex Vision being the Pyrex pot that people would cook drugs in, which related to hip-hop, and many rappers started wearing it, which led to many fans start wearing it, and he was charging a hefty price for it. Also, Virgil did a small tribute to Michael Jordan by printing Pyrex in 23 on Champion and Ralph Lauren, which increased their price to $400 for pieces that were likely made for under $50, making him more famous, more controversy, and richer. Despite Pyrex Vision closing down a year later, it affected Virgil's approach to the fashion world and inspired him to create his multi-creative agency as well as his well-known brand now, Off-White. It was 2013 when Virgil decided that it was time for Off-White to emerge. The idea behind this label was a blend of streetwear, art, music, travel, and luxury. It was defined by Virgil as, quote, the gray area between black and white as the color Off-White. Quotation marks were signature details of the brand and were references to his work back in the architecture field. In a year's time, Virgil showed Off-White men's and women's collections at Paris Fashion Week. The same year, Virgil was almost named as a finalist for the LVMH prize. Although he didn't win, being so high on the fashion ladder brought Off-White much-needed recognition, and Virgil started collaborations with big labels. 2016 was the year when Off-White issued several collections with Moncler and Umbo, which caught the attention of other big brands. 2017 brought even more opportunities to Virgil as he won the British Fashion Award for the Best Urban Luxe Brand and opened a collaborative exhibition with Takashi Murakami at the Gagosian, which is a massive art gallery. And Takashi Murakami, also known for making the Kids See Ghosts album cover, but Graduation, and a very popular artist in his own right. Future collaborations would skyrocket Virgil to be a driving force in the fashion world. But the most notable collaboration in Virgil Abloh's career, other than him eventually working for Louis Vuitton, which is not necessarily a collaboration, was Off-White and Nike. It opened the world of sneakers before him, something he had always dreamed of when sending designs to Nike. It all started with Virgil creating a redesign of 10 classic Nike sneakers, naming the collection the 10. Nike was in awe of the collection and continued working with Virgil several times in the future. Next, Virgil was named the head of Louis Vuitton after his predecessor, Kim Jones, replaced Chris Van Ash at Dior. It was a unique achievement as it was the very first time in the fashion world that a black person, or quote, person of color as they labeled it, was the head of Louis Vuitton. In 2018, Virgil launched his first collection and used other people of color, as they described it, to walk on catwalks showing clothing that promoted diversity. Ye was present at this moment and shared a hug with an iconic photo that can be found everywhere with Virgil, remembering how far he had come from the internship to the highest ranks within the fashion industry. That same year, Virgil did a collection of home goods with IKEA, and it was a landmark for further Virgil home creations. You know what I'm most inspired by? That kid that hasn't had the chance to showcase their brand yet. Those kids motivate the work I do every day. That's the muse for me. The next generation. I want to work to inspire people like them. In 2021, Virgil Abloh was invited to be a keynote speaker at the graduating class commencement and received an honorary degree from the Rhode Island School of Design. In his speech, he said, "How ironic this moment is. Now, I myself was a bright-eyed high school graduate that looked at the list of schools I wanted to apply to. I wanted to join RISD. I filled out the application, sent it in, and got a big fat no. But let that story not deter you from achieving and going after your goals because, ironically, fast forward all these years later, I have over my shoulder an honorary degree from RISD through a whole lot of hard work and determination. There's nothing more important in my mind than a youthful generation that wants to take on the world with full force and creativity. The world is in need of ideas, and ambitious ones. So be ambitious and relish in your achievements." When Virgil was climbing up the fashion ladder, Ye was busy too. He tried to get another internship as an assistant to Raf Simons, but was denied the job, or Raf Simons, however these fashion people pronounce it. Raf, when asked about how he felt about having Ye as his assistant, said, "I was blown away from the planet when he told me. I know he's very serious about this. I don't take it as a joke, but how can I imagine him being my intern? It's a very extreme situation." From that point, Ye started some serious work on the Yeezy brand. He was working on the sneaker design while being in partnership with Nike, but the release date of the sneakers was delayed plenty of times, and the royalties and lack of creative direction only brought dissatisfaction. Eventually, Ye switched over to Adidas, and then the sneakers were released in 2013, and he debuted his brand Yeezy in 2015. Yeezy Season 1 was revealed to the world in 2015 during New York Fashion Week. The collaboration between Ye and Adidas was very fruitful and received numerous appraisal as well as tons of sales. The main color of the collection were nudes, army greens, and navy blues, and it did get some, I would say, pushback and criticism from hip-hop fans saying it looked like homeless wear. Two models of sneakers, Yeezy Boost 750s, the high tops, and the 350s, the lows, were made as decade-defining sneakers, more so the 350 since there weren't more than a couple of models of the 750s before they were discontinued. You guys know my influences. I've got 4 influences, and it's written all over the face. You see Raf Simons right there, you see Helmet, you see Margiela, you see Vanessa Beecroft, you see Catherine Hammett. It's blatantly right there. In Yeezy Season 2, Ye added bomber jackets and a bit more brighter hues into the palette. Next Yeezy season was also a release party for Ye's 2016 album, The Life of Pablo, and was more a star-studded spectacle that's still highly praised for such a unique delivery and mix of music and fashion. Though Season 4 was a bit of a disaster because of the stiletto-heeled shoes that proved to be hard to walk in for many of the models. Yeezy Season 6 made headlines again by the way it was promoted. With the help of his then-wife Kim Kardashian and her star friends, Ye had a social media campaign, and the collection itself was revealed through Instagram with the help of various influencers who wore pieces from the collection and showed them with paparazzi-styled photos. The next two Yeezy seasons in terms of apparel didn't really make much noise. They added flared leggings, neutral-toned woolen bralettes, and waist-length cropped puffers. And at this point, Yeezy season the clothing wasn't performing as well as the sneakers. Those became a global hit, and even after Ye's deal with Adidas was terminated, he's still selling a ton in the secondhand market, and plenty of people want more. But we're to see if that's yet to come, although it's very unlikely. From an internship with no experience and just getting coffees for somebody, to having two of the biggest fashion brands in the world, one of the biggest sneakers and one more so based in apparel, and working for one of the most popular luxury brands ever as one of the heads, you could say that Ye and Virgil definitely dominated fashion. Known as the godfather of urban wear, and now looking over the multi-billion dollar industry that he inspires, whilst still not being remembered or appreciated by many of the newer generation, lies Carl Williams. He was a visionary of many firsts, including the first to develop the baggy jeans concept, the first urban fashion company to employ an all-black sales force, and the first designer to host a fashion show at the White House during President Bill Clinton's term. The often unrecognized father of hip-hop fashion started it all from scratch, with almost zero support. Carl Williams was born in 1968 in Costa Rica to a Panamanian father and a Costa Rican mother. When he was just 3 years old, his parents decided to move to the United States. They came to Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn in 1972. Brooklyn is the place where the hip-hop scene eventually grew. It was born in the Bronx. But people were getting into a certain kind of lifestyle because of it. During these early years, b-boys popped up all over New York City, and Carl was one of them. When he was 13, he wanted to be a rapper. He even formed a crew, but was far too young to get into the clubs at the time. So they made their own fun instead. He describes it as, quote, "We'd always have house parties in somebody's basement or apartment. Those parties were so intimate and so real, and that's what brought the culture together. Hip-hop was the unity that brought people together." Williams and his crew had the passion, but ultimately not the commercial goods. If Williams hadn't become a globally admired fashion designer, this is where the story would end. But he was undeterred by his early hip-hop failures. "I still wanted to be a part of the culture, so I thought, if I can't rap, then let me dress the rapper. That was my mission from the beginning." A new stream of fashion also emerged, including baggy clothes, jewelry, and even cars. Everyone was very intrigued to make their mark on the people around them with unique and rare clothing. His father was already very fashionable. As Carl Williams was growing up, he watched his father dress in special, custom-made clothing. He would select fabrics and they would go to Flatbush and have them tailored to his exact liking. Carl recalled this by saying, "Well, you know how the whole thing started. My dad is Panamanian, so when we first came to the US, my dad used to get his clothes tailor-made because he wanted his clothes kind of to have a certain style, the way it was in Panama. When his parents separated, he stayed with his mom. Here, he saw how much fashion mattered to the local kids, but he couldn't buy trendy clothes like new sneakers and jackets. This reminded him of the tailor who used to make his father's clothes. So, he took up a job delivering newspapers at dawn to earn money to make his own clothes." He said, "So when he," referring to his father, "and my mom split up, we moved into the inner city and on East New York and Brooklyn. That's when I really realized how important fashion was to the kids out there, because when I came outside, I didn't have on brand new sneakers and my clothes and all put together. So kids are snapping on you, right? It's like you weren't one of the cool kids, didn't have our nice clothing." His first step towards his own fashion was taking a branded jean suit he had and making it something different. He bought 5 yards of linen and it changed the pockets a little. It was a game-changing move for him because it stood out from what everyone else was wearing, and he couldn't be bought. When he was 15, he made another big break in his neighborhood. People in the neighborhood started to notice him as he kept making customized clothes for himself. Some of the other kids around even started asking Carl to make clothes for them. They earned money from drug deals and spent a decent amount on fashion. But while everyone else was selling drugs or hustling, Carl decided to pursue fashion for life. He describes it as, back then everyone was selling drugs. Like, drug dealing was very popular. Everyone was doing it. It was like mainstream to sell drugs. And so there was a lot of money on the street. So everybody was into fashion, buying hot cars and jewelry. He once made a jacket for a friend of his who highly appreciated Carl's work at the time. While hanging out at the local park one day, a friend named Joe showed off his jacket to a girl around them. Carl described it as, she said, "Who made that jacket?" He's like, "Carl made it." She's like, "Let me see it." So she starts looking at this jacket. She's like, "Well, the jacket is nice, but if Carl made it, how come his name ain't on it?" Carl immediately understood the point she had made, and that he could create a brand for his work just by putting the name on the clothes. He started using the name Carl Kanye. The name Carl Kanye was a wordplay referring to Carl Can I. This was a question that Williams wanted to ask himself, that was, can I be successful? He knew that he needed to find a way to get his clothes in front of the people who mattered most, the hip-hop artists. He decided to give his clothes away to established and locally acknowledged rappers because he knew that if they wore his clothes, it would help to promote his brand and get his name out there. His plan worked, and soon, hip-hop artists like Big Daddy Kane, Heavy D, LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Flava Flav, and Chuck D were all wearing Carl Kanye clothes. They were featured in magazines and on MTV, and they helped to make Carl Kanye a household name. Carl's strategy was pretty simple, but it was effective. He knew that rappers were trendsetters, and he used them to his advantage, and it was a mutually beneficial exchange. By giving them his clothes, he was able to reach a larger audience and establish his brand as a force in the hip-hop fashion world. Carl and his folks were the faces of hip-hop fashion because no other designer was paying attention to the cultural surge of hip-hop music. As brands distanced themselves from black and within black hip-hop culture and clothing, Carl Kanye and his partners decided to embrace it because it was all they had. It was their culture. He described the approach by saying, hustling. You know, we grew up on the streets. We know how to hustle. So we hustle hard. We know how to get our brand out there, and we know how to turn $1 into $2. The same type of elements that you grew up on the streets, we took our street sense and just turned it into fashion. So, you know, we did come to LA, set up a company or creek as I did my research. LA had all the manufacturing factories set up and where we wanted to go. In 1989, with the name to his brand, Carl moved to California with, quote, $1,000 and a pocket full of dreams. Carl Kanye's journey as a fashion entrepreneur would continue in Los Angeles. He was assisted by AZ, a driver for a clothing company, who helped him connect with factories in Orange County. This was the start of something new, something exciting. His next move was inspired by an Eazy-E CD. Drawn to the music, he decided to set up his first store in a place that buzzed with energy. He opened a store on Crenshaw Boulevard, the first Carl Kanye store. Located in the heart of South Central, it was where this black community gathered. He said, "I'm gonna find the area out here with all the black people." So we opened up a store because we know that's going to be our mark, right? Carl Kanye didn't have the money to rope in a big name for their launch, so instead they chose a young student from New York City by the name of Sean Combs, later to be known as Puff Daddy, to be the face of their 1991 campaign. Things were starting to look good for Carl and his brand, but then they faced a sudden robbery. What happened was that the natives targeted Carl and his business because they were non-natives. They were, quote, foreigners. They were from the East Coast, not LA. Carl describes it as, dudes knew we were from New York, so dudes had better plans. So, as they came in there on a Sunday morning at gunpoint and backed the van up and took our sewing machines and all our samples. Following the robbery, he found himself at a crossroads. He recounted those days saying, "It was a real turning point for us. I had to decide whether I want to stay out here in California or go back to New York. I was weighing my options. New York, a lot of people get arrested, shot, and it just wasn't a good time to be there. And I was like, you know, I think we could stick it out here." So we ended up getting an apartment in Hollywood, and I was able to raise enough money to put an ad in Right On magazine, which is one of the first music hip-hop magazines. So we placed an ad in there. We were doing a mail order from an apartment in Hollywood, so at least we didn't have to be in a store anymore. We were selling. His decision to stay marked a significant change in his lifestyle. He became more disciplined. I think that the one thing that turned things around the corner for us was us, me and myself, being straight focused. Like, I didn't go out. I was in the apartment every day, all day. We used to drink beer, lift weights, and focus on what we were trying to do. At the age of 23, Carl Williams' career turned significantly when he attended a, quote, Cross Colors fashion show. It was there that he met the founder of Cross Colors, the brand, Carl Jones. The meeting eventually led to a partnership in 1991 that transformed his fledgling brand. The partnership resulted in a $6 million order from the merry-go-round, and Carl Kanye found its place in stores across the US, and amidst the rapid growth, Carl structured his business wisely. Partnering 50-50 with his associate, he involved his friends as sales representatives, knowing their deep understanding of the culture would be an asset. Despite his monthly salary of $17,000, his friends, who were sales representatives for him, often earned more, making upwards of $80,000 a month. They eventually solved this by taking careful steps to manage their finances to ensure a steady flow of money and sustainable growth for the brand. However, with the brand's rise in fame came unanticipated challenges. News broke that Carl's company had made $89 million in sales, and an article in Daily News detailed his luxurious lifestyle, complete with a mansion in Sunset Hills and Neapolitan Mastiffs. This attracted unwanted attention from his neighborhood. Guys back home started reading articles about, your company did $89 million in sales, and they had an article in Daily News saying I bought this mansion up in Sunset Hills. They really made this article sound like with ice collar rich and famous, and then you still got to go back home and, you got the wolves out there. So, they want to attach themselves to you. So it's almost like you got to change your street strategy somewhat once you start to get your names on the paper because it's all new to them. In the first few years, the partnership between Carl Kanye and Cross Colors was very successful. Carl's line was making $50 to $60 million, while Cross Colors was making around $100 million. But their approach to business was different. Carl said, I didn't want my stuff too much out there like that. I was okay. Cross Go, they didn't care. They were taking orders as much as they could get, as much as they could produce. Things changed when merry-go-round started to slow down their business. Carl described the situation. Cross Color had probably $25 to $30 million in open orders on the books, and all this production is in rotation. Then merry-go-round comes in and cancels all the orders. Like, merry-go-round is going out of business. They had to cancel. With this sudden change, Cross Colors faced a big problem. They had already paid for fabric in production, and they owed money to the bank. To cover their costs, Cross Colors started to sell their clothes everywhere they could. Gas stations, barbershops, wholesalers, local neighborhoods. But this move hurt the brand. With their clothes being so widely available, Cross Colors lost some of its appeal in the market. In 1993, Robert Greenberg was the owner of the shoe company called Skechers. He always wanted to partner up with Carl Kanye after observing the success they had as a brand. Robert proposed by saying, I want to do your footwear. And he said, I understand the situation with the banks and we could possibly work something out with them. I want to pull you out of this and I want to go into business with you, and you own your name, own the scent. I just want to be able to license your brand and do your footwear and to help you build a global international company. The collaboration resulted in a line of shoes that combined the best of both worlds, comfort and style. These shoes feature trendy designs inspired by urban fashion, making them a hit amongst some sneaker enthusiasts and fashion-conscious individuals. In 1993, the track Roughneck was released by. It was the first song where the name Carl Kanye was mentioned. The lyrics were, Carl Kanye sagging, Timbo's dragging, frontin' in his ride with his homeboys bragging. Carl Kanye's influence extended beyond just his own brand, as it's also been instrumental in a blueprint in inspiring and shaping other brands that would come after within the industry. It's a well-known fact that the founders of Fubu, Fat Farm, and similar companies once either worked with or looked up to Carl Kanye. They learned the ropes of the business, took significant influence, understood the infrastructure, and then decided to branch out and establish their own brands. Reflecting on this development, Carl Kanye said, these companies wanted someone from the infrastructure of Carl Kanye. They figured, if this guy could do, we want to know how he does it. How's his work? Doing too well. We weren't part of this. So they thought of snatching my employees one by one. It started to branch off and do their own things. At the time it bothered us, but now we understand it's just business. Even though the initial loss of his employees to competing brands was a concern, Carl later realized this was simply part of the business world. Over time, he came to view it positively, seeing his influence spread across the entire hip-hop fashion industry. As the desire for hip-hop streetwear skyrocketed, Carl Williams found himself right in the middle of the boom. The 90s were a period defined by G-Funk, East Coast, West Coast, and the golden age of R&B. Karl's signature oversized baggy denim became a staple, especially on the stars gracing covers like The Source. Even Tupac, at the height of his fame, was a regular wearer of Karl Kani's designs. Karl once took some of his clothes to Tupac because he wanted him to wear them for free, but Tupac said, "I'm not going to charge you to wear your clothing. You're black. I don't charge my people for anything." This connection with the stars wasn't limited to Tupac, as names such as Biggie Smalls, Nas, Aaliyah, Wu-Tang Clan, and Snoop Dogg also sported signature Karl Kani logo. Even Eminem gave a nod to Karl Kani rather jokingly. Karl took it lightly by saying, "Eminem kinda made a joke from my name in a song once. The lyric goes, one day I was walking by with the Walkman on when I caught a guy, gave me an awkward eye, and I strangled him in the parking lot with his Karl Kani. I initially wondered why Eminem would want to strangle me, but it was quite funny, and well, Eminem is Eminem." And this was from the track that we all know, Forgot About Dre. At the peak of his success, Karl was the owner of a multi-million-dollar company, with his clothes being worn by the most popular stars within hip-hop. However, he never let the success get to his head. Money can't buy legacy, and it can't buy history. I never fed into any of the success that I had, and at the same time, I didn't dwell on any of the failures that I had. Karl believed this grounded attitude is why Karl Kani had remained relevant in streetwear for a very long time and is still being sold today, unlike many other brands. It's still endorsed by some of the biggest names in hip-hop and pop, yet despite all this fame and success, Karl's decided to stay low-key. And he said, "I still find inspiration by watching what kids wear and doing my version of it. Kids set trends, they know what's up. When you're connected to that, you're always going to be on top." Kanye West was the centerpiece of a small world that attracted many exceptionally creative people, one of whom is Matthew Williams. While he and Ye were best friends, Matthew parted ways from Donda a decade ago and rose to the head of Givenchy. Matthew Williams was born in 1985 in Evanston, Illinois, and when he was 2, he moved to Pismo Beach, California. His childhood was serene, with parents who supported him and a school that was facing the Pacific Ocean. Both of his parents worked in medical fields, so it was natural that Matthew saw himself as another medical professional, specifically an emergency room doctor. Matthew's grandmother had an inexplicable taste in fashion and was the president of the Mid-State Fair, which attracted musicians such as MC Hammer, Boyz II Men, and Britney Spears to perform. As a teenager, Matthew often drove himself either to LA or Santa Barbara to listen to bands and DJs. From what he saw, he realized that there were many other job opportunities that lied beyond the traditional 9-to-5 work that he had grown up on. I grew up in a seaside town in California in the 90s. The street culture was at the heart of children's lives from the age of 7. Rap was the most popular music. Surfing and skateboarding had an important place in the lives of children, but also in the lives of their parents. So you could say that it's part of my identity. I just came from there. Matthew thought that he would spend his entire life living in California. As a teenager, he was passionate about playing soccer and believed that it would be his future. He played Division I at UC Santa Barbara, and at the age of 16, he would spend the summer in Europe, training with professional soccer teams in Vienna and Oslo, Norway, and it was his first journey to Europe, and he saw a world outside California and the cultural nuances of the places he visited. He also heard techno music for the first time and saw some teenagers dancing to it. Additionally, he noticed the clothes that they were wearing, specifically some crazy jeans. "That's what I thought I was going to do with my life," he says, laughing. "I'd play and then just be a coach or something when I got older." If not for a soccer injury, it's safe to say that he might have had a completely different career trajectory. But when he was 19, he discovered fashion and the wonders of New York City. Matthew moved to New York City and then assumed he would live there for the rest of his life. He started working for Corpus, a friend's denim line, trying to find inspiration from everywhere possible. Matthew was always on the lookout for fresh magazines with Japanese street-style designs and was observing images of Hedi Slimane at Dior. As part of his job, Matthew had some spare time, which he spent discussing creative ideas with like-minded people. I think, more than anything, the dialogue with other creatives is the thing that I've been maybe most addicted to. There's a creative discourse about things that are sometimes kind of abstract or emotional. Since his first job, Matthew's been inspired by fashion. I dedicated my life to it. It's the only job I've ever had. It was always, you can be talented, but how much more effort are you going to put in to be more than just talented? Also, he developed a taste for nightlife as he attended parties pretty much every day. People were getting so loose. It would be like celebrities with musicians and artists and cool kids. I would go out every single night, and I was friends with a few promoters. That was my first time when I was actually meeting celebrities and hanging out and dancing with them. It felt more normal. Not only did he enjoy meeting new people, but he also observed fashion trends around him and later created something based on what he saw. When Matthew Williams was 20 years old, he met Jennifer, who would later become his wife. Jennifer had already worked as the sales director for Hood by Air and as a designer for Edith Miller. Matthew was deeply touched by her and remains hugely inspired by her. Around the time when he started working as the creative director at House of Gaga, he designed a jacket for Kanye West for the 2008 Grammys. The jacket was custom made and had glowing chest panels. Ye was delighted to have such an outfit and hired Matthew to work at Donda under Willow Parent. The interesting thing about this generation is that they can be very focused on the visual bit, but Matthew is very passionate about the source material and the ideas and where they come from. While being a creative director for Lady Gaga, with whom he was dating at that time, Matthew was responsible for creating the most memorable looks, for example, Disco Stick. Matthew was also appointed as the creative director for the Monster Ball tour and organized the Supreme x Lady Gaga ad campaign. While being with House Gaga, Matthew met with Nick Knights, Niccolo Formichetti, Eddie Slimane, and Alexander McQueen. Nick Knight remembers, Matt was introducing a lot of art to Gaga and pushing her to explore the things that she was interested in. He was a very strong influence in Gaga's life. When they parted company, I became friends with Matt because he's a very nice young man. Nick Knight was fascinated by his talent that he invited him to be art director of Show Studio, his forward-thinking online art and fashion platform. After that, Matthew worked as a newly appointed creative director at Donda. Before that, he also helped Ye with his first clothing brand, Pastel, for which he helped create and manufacture the first samples. Also, Matthew worked as an art director and music consultant for Yeezus, and during Kanye's Watch the Throne tour, he worked on stage development and design for the European leg of the tour. In addition, Matthew helped create famous music videos such as Mercy and New Slaves. And when asked about Ye, Matthew said, "He's the person that gave me my first break. I owe him everything. He's been an amazing friend and mentor." And he added that it was Kanye who taught him to believe in himself and his instincts. I probably talk to him more than my family. He is like family, like a brother. We mostly just talk about life. After that, with Virgil, Francesca, Heron, Justin, and Jennifer as the sales director, Trill emerged. It was a brand that was created more for fun rather than being a serious fashion concept. It was just a group of friends having fun, spur-of-the-moment ideas, not thinking too much about the longevity of what it was we were putting out. Still, the brand produced t-shirts, hoodies, and accessories with hashtags and a well-recognized logo written using dripping blood font. In 2015, 1017 Alix 9SM was created. Luxury sportswear, crossbody bags, and harness accessories sum up what you can expect. Materials were dense and protect the owner from all sorts of bad weather, including rain, wind, and snow. All the collections of the brand are for people who know what to expect and are prepared for it. In the beginning, Matthew and his wife, Jennifer, did everything themselves, such as producing ideas, designing, making commercials, and selling. While the company had grown, Jennifer focused more on the commercial side, despite her creation of the bestseller bag, the Brie bag. The Brie bag was a supple leather purse that resembles a Victorian doctor's kit, but a more futuristic version of it. The brand is instantly recognized for its belt buckles, which are key to the brand's connections with other companies. The buckle produced for Dior's Spring-Summer 2019 show is now the basis of Kim Jones' line and has gained many fans among celebrities, such as Travis Scott, Skepta, Billy Hadid, and Laura Dern. It feels different than any other buckle out there. The buckle, designed in collaboration with Macintosh, was used on raincoats based on heritage brand that are centuries old and made to look like they were from the Matrix. The beautiful thing about Italy is that everything can be made here and driven in a day to wherever it needs to go. Alix is all about evolution rather than a revolution of any kind. Matthew wishes that people would stop buying a lot of things that they do not need. Instead, they would buy quality goods that are better and would last for ages. I think making high-quality clothes that last is very sustainable. When you're buying a luxury product, you're paying so that somebody else is paid properly in healthy working conditions. When something's super cheap, someone pays the price along the way. It was just the beginning of the summer of 2020 when Matthew Williams was appointed as the new creative director of Givenchy. Matthew said in the statement, "The Mason's unique position and timeless aura make it an undeniable icon, and I'm looking forward to working together with its ateliers and teams to move it to a new era based on modernity and inclusivity. Givenchy has had such a rich history and archives to pull from. So, in all the collections, there are odes and nuances that come from shapes or silhouettes. Then I translate them in a modern way with a modern technique, whether that's applying evening wear silhouettes to an outerwear piece, or using elements of dresses and jersey, or finding new ways to do exciting embroidery techniques. It's always a rich pool of inspiration for me." It was said that him being the creative director of Givenchy wasn't just a design job. In the eyes of many, it was viewed as a megaphone that would empower him to share his biggest ideas, especially for someone that didn't come from the traditional fashion background. Nick Knight said, "The reason Enyce became successful and the reason his work at Givenchy will hopefully become successful is because he cares. He cares about the materials he's using and where they're sourced from. He's interested in all of the sciences. He's a Renaissance man in the way that he's very excited by science as much as art and fashion." Another component of his somewhat seemingly quick rise, although it wasn't that, has been his talent for understanding various accessories, but bags for men. Matthew was called by Jones to collaborate on the revitalization of John Galliano's trademark saddlebag and transform it into a more menswear item at Dior. Don C said, "Matthew is not the same figure as a Virgil or a Ye. He's not a streetwear guy. He's more of an artist. He's connected to that, and he can apply that, but he's an artist." After the appointment, Matthew moved to Paris and launched his first collection in 100 days. The collection was shown digitally at an arena outside Paris on March 7th and was followed by a more official debut, more like a show, in the big leagues. "I'm always saying I'm designing for me and what I want. I always try on the clothes myself, and I feel them, I wear them, I live in them to understand them." The Lover's Lock was the starting point of the first collection and a symbiosis of luxury and utility. It was said that Matthew was inspired by thousands of locks left by lovers at the Pont des Arts in Paris. The collection had a classic blazer, a single earring, and an industrial embellishment on a reinvented Antigona bag, as well as other pieces. Matthew made a collaboration with Nick Knight and Playboy Carti for the campaign video and used the new motif as Carti pronounced Givenchy in a variety of both standard and unconventional styles. "My instinct is to feel like something that I'm making is desirable or exciting, or challenging. That idea of things being personal is exciting, because everyone's life is interesting. Everyone has a story to tell, and it can be a constant source of inspiration." For his debut collection, Matthew handpicked a group of 54 influential people, sent each of them pieces, and asked them to interpret and photograph the items as they would like and post them on Instagram. It was hard to avoid lots of photos from Julianne Moore, Maria Sharapova, Kylie Jenner, and Kim Kardashian showing off new designs by him. I think that's what's exciting about that project. Everyone interprets the clothes in their own way. That's the reality of the world, you know? I have a concept in mind when I put the clothing together in the shows or the shoots, but when they go out into the real world, they have a life of their own. They get worn and mixed with other designers' clothes. It's exciting to see how people interpret and embody the mood. I think being in dialogue with people who I've met over the years, musicians or artists or athletes or other designers, it's a great inspiration for me. And this is just another example of someone who was very close to Ye and kind of part of the Inception crew alongside Virgil, with Virgil becoming the head of Louis Vuitton with his own Off-White, and Matthew Williams being head of Givenchy with his own brand, Enyce or Enyce, and Ye with Yeezy. Clearly, the crew is some heavy hitters and was taking over the fashion industry, and it became true now. Trill was a creative group of individuals who were inspired by fashion and music and were set to be the next big name in the streetwear industry of fashion, although that wasn't even their intentional aim at the beginning. They had a lot of influential friends who helped to create hype for their brand, selling out products, but as fast as they blew up, they seemed to just fall off, with the brand pretty much dead now. Trill was a DJ and party night collective that was formed by Virgil Abloh, Heron Preston, Matthew Williams, Florencia Galarza, and Justin Saunders. Before Heron, Virgil, and Matthew had an idea of creating Trill, Heron had did some jobs for Nike, Virgil, Matthew, and Heron were working behind the scenes for Kanye West, and when asked how they would describe Trill, they said the following: an art collective and DJ crew whose image and sound is defined by the frenzy of new youth culture found on the pages of the deep web and on the blocks of big cities. If someone was in a position to explain what Trill stood for, someone could say it was the process of being up on something for quite some time before someone else was there. And that's how they defined it with the quote that we just read. While being interviewed by GQ in 2019, the group remembered the time when they had an idea to get together initially and have some fun mixing both music and fashion. Matthew Williams, who's now a designer for the popular brand Enyce or Alix, we were living between London and Paris, working for Ye, and we'd go out after work, and we weren't hearing the music we wanted to hear in the clubs. So we contacted some friends and started playing music off our computers and iPhones. Virgil said, when you have creative people all working on laptops, you listen to music. So Trill was more like a group chat that turned into something for the public sphere. Heron Preston said, one day Matt Williams, Justin Saunders, and Virgil came up to me and were like, yo, do you want to start throwing parties with us? At the time, I thought they were playing with Osama bin Laden's name. I was like, oh, you guys are crazy. But it turned out to be Trill, spelled B-E-E-N. Florencia Galarza. I get a call from Virgil, not ever having met him or really knowing who he is, and he was like, you sound dope. Heron says you're dope. People think you're dope. You're in. 2012 was really awesome. Justin Saunders. I've never heard Virgil say a negative thing in my whole life. What I knew about creativity was saying no to things, but he's on the opposite flip. It's like when Virgil convinced me to be a DJ. I still don't know how to use a mixer. I said to Virgil, I don't know how to DJ, and he said, it doesn't matter, let's just go have some fun. And then, eventually, we were DJing at Coachella. As members of the group were already one foot in the door of the world of music and fashion, they quickly became popular and gathered fans around both of their adventures. First, the group was focused on designing t-shirts and snapback caps released in limited quantities. Having friends such as Kanye West, Drake, Big Sean, A$AP Rocky, and Rihanna helped the collective to attract more followers and fans, selling more of their products. Their logo, Trill, was written using that Rocky horror picture font, which wasn't liked by many in the beginning. Also, having not exactly thought through the price range, the collective was harshly criticized initially for having shoelaces sold for $100. It was also said that the quality of the merchandise that Trill was selling was rather average, which contributed to people feeling that they were tricked into spending more than they should have. Despite all that, Trill knew how to keep their fans happy and excited. So they were using Tumblr and other social media a lot, where they continuously shared mixtapes, images, music videos, and of course, throwing all-night parties. In 2 years' time, the hype around the brand slowly started to die out. Some would say that the diss track Multiply that A$AP Rocky released, who was just 1 year ago or 1 year prior, the brand's advocate, added fuel to the flame. In the diss track, A$AP Rocky was angry that Trill and Hood by Air were copying his style and, in some way, were monetizing it without giving him any sort of royalties or payment. Surprisingly, Heron didn't take much offense, as it would seem, because he started to sell t-shirts with a printed screenshot from the diss as a part of the Heron Preston bootleg series. Not only did Heron monetize A$AP Rocky's critique of the brand, but he also wrote a witty and smart commentary about the way rap and fashion intertwined on an Instagram post. What happened to the rapper on rapper beef? The days of Biggie versus Tupac and Jay-Z versus Nas are over. Remember how Nas's Ether or Tupac's Hit 'Em Up made you feel? Remember what that meant for rap music? The fact that a rapper dissed a clothing company is a huge sign of the times. Does that mean rap is boring? Has rap lost its edge? Today, the power in music is style. Power is fashion. Let's keep this stuff shocking and competitive. This is how you push things forward. And the song video is good. Let's continue to shake stuff up. Our culture needs it. Although Trill did some collaborations with brands like KTZ, Stussy, Coca-Cola, and Hood by Air, it didn't change the fact that the consumer base was becoming less and less invested in purchasing their stuff. Also, more accusations started to appear that the brand was nothing more than a group of, quote, influencers, which wasn't even a term at that point, who had very wealthy and famous friends who were willing to help with creating a buzz and hype around the brand. Matthew Williams, the co-founder of Trill, admitted that, quote, "It has always been about having fun with your friends. Because of our social media presence, we can amplify a small, spontaneous idea so it seems much bigger than it actually is." From which a deduction can be made that there was no big plan for Trill from the beginning, rather than having a good laugh, spending some time together, and making some quick cash. In 2015, all the founders of Trill decided that it would be a good idea to sell the brand to PacSun, as it would make their streetwear even more accessible to all people, including young kids. But a year later, PacSun was bankrupt. Luckily, Culture Kings purchased Trill, and by doing that, they closed the gap in selling high-end streetwear. Matthew Cristani, the senior designer of Culture Kings, said, "Culture Kings are thrilled to have secured a license for Trill to fill a gap in the market for customers seeking attainable, high-end streetwear. We aim to open up an opportunity for our target demographic to experience the quality and trend-driven graphic direction of certain corners of the luxury fashion market, but at a more accessible price point. With this in mind, we're incorporating futuristic themes for graphic and garment design to evolve the Trill brand into something memorable that cements a strong legacy at Culture Kings." He hinted about the first collection with them. "Our first collection is entitled Future Vision and conceptually portrays symbols of technology in the form of cyber-themed graphics that provide bold and eccentric products. We also studied Trill's history and have built on their recognizable logos and symbols and put our fresh spin on them. To fuse it all together, a lot of emphasis went into sourcing the most quality fabrics and trims to elevate these products to the next level. This is just the beginning." All 5 co-founders of Trill didn't stop their work in the world of fashion or music after they sold their brand. As a matter of fact, they only accelerated. Virgil Abloh had started Pyrex Vision, where he experimented a lot more with graphics. While Pyrex Vision was also not on the market for long, it was a foundation for his next brand, which was the highly successful Off-White. Matthew Williams started Enyce, which later changed its name to 1017 Enyce 9SM, and was backed by Slam Jam Socialism founder. The brand did plenty of collaborations with huge brands like Nike, Dior, and Moncler. And in 2020, Matthew Williams was appointed as the head of the Givenchy fashion house. Aaron Preston was already working on his brand. In 2016, he released Uniform, a catalog of zero-waste clothes that were created in collaboration with the New York City Department of Sanitation. In 2017, he presented his 2017-18 Autumn-Winter collection at Paris Fashion Week. And as a DJ, Aaron worked on several events that were organized by Supreme, GQ, Sprite, and Ford, as well as he took part in major festivals and top-scale events such as Fool's Gold, Coachella, and Ultra. Florencia Galarza went back to doing the thing that she did before, playing in Bowery League for the Kith Cobras. Justin Saunders continued his work in his own design studio, as well as creating new designs for Kanye West. The truth is, even before this brand was sold to PacSun, it was either at the peak or already starting to fall off. It didn't last very long. A lot of these guys at the time were doing sporadic projects, spur of the moment, and didn't really think about the longevity of them, and perhaps they didn't even think they would get as big as they did. A lot of it was just hype train, kind of hypebeast, peak hypebeast market, I would say. And over time, a lot of these faded. However, they did use the foundation from them, and cashing out early, selling it to bigger brands, in order to build something that has lasted many years later. And that pretty much goes for all of them. Make sure to subscribe for more.